Ow! So sorry about that. Meow 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 meow. You know, I realized my meowing. It kinda sounds like Philion's whatever.
Oh yeah, Chad? Here's a challenge! Stop! Stop! This is a fun challenge! This is gonna be a fun challenge, alright, Chad? Here's a challenge. You have to play the most appropriate soundboard. You have to play the most appropriate soundboard whenever I do anything, okay, guys? Alright? So whatever I'm doing, you guys have to play the soundboard for it. Okay? That's right. Vibe boom. It's a good start. Alright, here we go, Snackers. Step one. Here we go. First one. Eat. You guys are actually cracked! What the frick? Snackers are so good at this! I freaking love you guys. You're the absolute best.
Yeah, I also say frick rather than the solid F word.
That one didn't make any sense at all. You guys are garbage. Do better, chat. Do better. No! No! Guys,
What's the one?
I'm taking you from an A to an F that fast. A to an F. You guys were trying so good. You guys are doing so well, and now look at you. You've fallen off. Get ratioed. Get ratioed.
So whatever. I'm gonna put the live chat on, I'm monitoring the CPU usage and stuff. Okay. Oh, frick. Okay. So far, so good. When I open this... Okay. Good. Chat. I feel like I should have restarted the PC. I hope that we don't get disconnected. Whatever. Anyway, yesterday I had fun playing. So I'm playing Warhammer again.
For the Kara's Encore!
Yes, I know it. I think I'll go for number 2.
Clown through! For the ancestors!
Whatever. But, I don't wanna get too invested with Filion because, like right now, she's gone. What are we supposed to do?
Kara's Encore!
If she's not, coming back anymore, then,
Kill Urks!
change of plans.
Strike out! Move now! Got! Dwarf warriors! Rage fast! Rage fast! Rage Reach far! Reach fast! Move! It is a reckoning! And... Yes! Ah! As you cover! Track! Dwarf warriors! We will have vengeance! Shield bearers, ho! Charge!
I don't have anti-large.
Gyrocopter!
Let's finish off the ones who are running.
Fast! Fire on the floor! Understood! Yes! I am the ranking lord! Slay the oath breakers! Spellcasters! Ah!
I run and fire at our men.
Baron! Oh! For the High King! Take them down! Quarrelers! Pursuit! Where's your targets, well? Rage fast! Charge! Pick your targets well! Understood, Lord!
I think we got him good. We got him good.
Get them! Don't skirmish! Kill him! Gyrocopter! Pursuit! Go! Strike out! Nothing can stop us! Move! To the Karazanko! Right up!
I've been doing well as dwarf.
Go! This won't misfire! Nothing can stop us! Wow! Stop firing!
Yeah.
Move now!
Meow meow meow.
Shoot the wizard!
Oh no, what happened?
Shot! Range far, range fast!
Meow 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 meow.
Mark out! Fire on the floor!
I love how fast their morale dropped.
Withdraw! Gyrocopter!
We didn't do much damage though.
Shield bearers, ho!
We didn't do much damage again. Just here weak against armor.
War of vengeance! It is an order! We stay put! To the Karazanko!
But I really think we're gonna win.
Rage fast! Rage fast! Fire! Your target's well! Attack! Quadrants! Gyrocopter! Get him! Nothing can stop us! Preparing body run! Yes, Lord! Fight! Go! What the vengeance! Begin! Gyrocopter!
We'll have some friendly fire.
Dive bomb! Get them! Get moving! Fire on the foe! Nothing can stop us! Most of the throng! Go! Gyrocopter! Withdraw! Whoa!
Where can I go from?
Anu! Kill Urks! Drag them down! Back up! Withdraw! It is a reckoning! Drain them! Yes! Take him down! Pick your target well!
Someone get my ally is also good.
Move! Charge!
In fact, their mate doing the most damage.
Withdraw! Fire on the earth! Up we go! Kazook! Shoot the wagon! Kazook! Kazook! Move now! Gyrocopter!
Hi, how are ya? It's just the same one, same one.
On the way! Strike out! Move now! Pull out! Go! By Grimnir I order thee! Plow through! Fire at will! Rage fast! Move!
Can't sleep? Why not?
I know!
Scalp them!
Fire on the foe! Cut their head-spitting tongues out! Getting close! Crutch thrower! Stop! Lay dead!
Necrofix Colossus. It's a freaking transformer.
Final words.
It's a freaking wooden mecha.
Wait there. Take cover. Withdraw. Mortal power. Vengeance! Kill them!
Meow 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 meow.
Nothing can stop us! Throw! Throw!
Yay, good morning.
Down!
So, later after the stream, I really gotta freaking review what I've been learning from the online course. So, you know, like I said, there's no English lesson actually. They're not teaching me how to speak English anymore or any technicalities. They're just teaching me how to conduct the lessons and how to document and how to make tutor notes. So later I gotta review those. And then so I think 3 days ago they told me to wait for the final exam, for the final course exam to be available on my end. That's why I really gotta review. You know, I gotta pass before I start teaching. You know, I gotta take a bath after the stream and I think I'm also gonna do my laundry. And then, you know, tomorrow I'm gonna hang the laundry under the sun. I hope it's sunny tomorrow. Have you seen this?
Hey!
No, I think I heard the fart. What the frick?
Hey! 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 You ever seen a breakdancing hobbit before? I bet not.
Tell me where is Gandalf, for I much desire to speak with you. Tell me where is Gandalf, for I much desire to speak with you. The power of Morgoth.
Damn, I'm so jealous.
Tell me where is Gandalf, for I much desire to speak with you. Tell me where is Gandalf, for I much desire to speak.
I've been playing dwarf. Maybe I should try something else. But I really like how dwarfs are like so heavily armored. They're really good for turtling. No, defensive strategies. Yeah, nice and
Put the pieces inside of that suitcase, and then Jung at February 31st, 2012. A 72-year-old retired high school teacher named Norm Johnson was playing the piano in his home in the tiny town of Madison, South Dakota, when his doorbell rang. And Norm was surprised. I mean, not because, just somebody had shown up at his house. I mean, the reality is getting unannounced visitors was not totally unusual in his household. But tonight in particular, it was odd, because the Madison High School basketball team had a big game that night, and pretty much the whole town was there cheering them on. Like, who isn't at the game ringing my doorbell right now? Who would that be? Now, usually Norm would be at the basketball game too. Not only had he coached several sports at the high school during the years he had taught there, but also he had grown up in Madison, and he had gone to the high school, and he had played on the football team and been on the track team, and those had really been, in some ways, some of the best years of his life. And I mean, even now, as an adult, he still had such strong feelings and such a strong affinity for Madison High. It was like a home away from home. But despite all that, Norm had chosen not to go to the game tonight because he had just had a long day of meetings for the local boards that he volunteered on, and just in general, he felt like he just needed some time home to relax. And so before he got up, Norm called out to his wife, Barb, who was in their kitchen, and he just asked, hey, do you have any idea who's at the door right now? She yelled back, no, I have no idea. So Norm got up from the piano and went to the door to answer it. When he opened the door, he saw a very unassuming man with gray hair and a beard who was standing out on the doorstep. Norm didn't know who this guy was, which was also just kind of odd, because again, Madison is like a really small town. Pretty much everybody knew each other. But before Norm could ask him who he was or what he wanted, this guy asked Norm, "Are you Norm Johnson?" And Norm said, "Yeah." And then, without another word, the man raised a pistol he was holding, and he fired. An hour later, Madison Police Sergeant Justin Meyer parked his car outside of a little brown house that was now cordoned off with crime scene tape. Meyer had been
this guy used to be a Navy SEAL.
totally shocked when the dispatcher
I don't know, so they say.
called him to tell him what had happened here, both because there hadn't been a murder in Madison in almost 100 years, and because Sergeant Meyer knew the victim, Norm Johnson. And so now Meyer walked up to the house and stepped over a huge puddle of blood right inside the front door. And then he found Norm's wife, Barb, sitting on the couch with a blanket wrapped around her shoulders. I mean, she looked like she was clearly in shock. Around Barb on the walls were all these old photos of her and Norm. And some of these photos clearly dated back to the 1950s when they had been high school sweethearts. Norm had been the star running back on the football team, and Barb had been a cheerleader. Meyer took a deep breath, and then he walked over and sat down next to Barb, and he asked her what happened. And she just said she didn't know. She didn't understand. She said that Norm had just gone to answer the door, and then seconds later, she heard what sounded like 2 gunshots. And then, as Barb sort of choked back tears, she said that she had run over and she had found Norm lying on the floor with blood pouring out of his face. And through the doorway, she happened to see this gray-haired man that she didn't recognize, calmly just walking away down their walkway towards his car, and then he just drove off. And Sergeant Meyer, when he heard this, I mean, he really couldn't believe it. I mean, in many ways, he was just as baffled as Barb was about how in the world something like that could have happened, especially in this town. Like, what Barb was describing sounded like a premeditated hit, like an assassination. But Meyer just couldn't imagine who would want to do that to Norm. Like, Norm was beloved by the whole community, and he had been for decades. And so eventually, Meyer left the house and began to speak to all the neighbors. But, as he discovered, pretty much none of them were home at the time of the shooting because they were all out at that basketball game. And then also Meyer discovered that nobody in the area had security cameras outside their houses. And so nobody had captured any images.
What? I thought it happened in the 50s. So 1717.
Ready to hunt!
On the evening of January 31st, 2012, a 72-year-old...
Okay, 2012. I'm so sorry, guys.
Nobody had captured any images or video of the crime. Because after all, I mean, Madison was typically a very safe area. And so by the time Meyer went home for the night, he was already starting to worry that he might not be able to solve this. However, the very next morning, Meyer got a call from a tipster. And this tipster said that there actually was one person in the area who definitely had a problem with Norm. That was a 73-year-old man named Carl Erickson. And at first, when Meyer began asking some basic follow-up questions, he just couldn't understand how this Carl guy could even be a suspect. I mean, he lived over an hour away in a different town. He was like a retired insurance officer with no criminal record. Like, how in the world would he be the guy that's, assassinating Norm? It just didn't make any sense. There was no clear connection. And then also, there was just the fact that as people, they couldn't have been more different. Like, they definitely would not have overlapped in society. You have Norm, who's like very outgoing and social and beloved, and you have Carl, who's totally a loner, keeps to himself, and for the most part was kind of rude, and just people didn't really like him. So like, there's just no reason that these two would come together. But Meyer had very little to go on here, and so he needed to follow up on any lead he really got. So that evening, he brought Carl in for questioning. Very quickly, he realized that actually, Norm and Carl do have one thing in common. It would turn out Carl and Norm had gone to the same high school. Carl had grown up in Madison before he moved away. And the past 50 years of both of their lives had largely been defined by who they were as teenagers in high school. But while high school had been Norm's glory days, Carl had a very different experience. He had been an outcast who basically, at best, nobody really paid attention to. And so while Norm is like the star of the football team dating the cheerleader, Carl had actually served as the football team's student manager, who basically ran errands for the coach and assisted from the sidelines. Deep down, Carl was deeply jealous of Norm, specifically. I mean, he was popular, he's this jock, he's got all the things that he wanted, but really couldn't achieve. And then one fateful day in the locker room after a practice, someone had come up behind Carl and put a jockstrap on his head as a kind of awful prank. And, Carl was not totally sure who did it, but over time, he became convinced it was Norm. Now, over time, the people who were involved in that prank, the football players, they just kind of forgot about it. And in fact, many of them sort of forgot about Carl himself. But Carl never forgot the humiliation. He stewed about it for more than 50 years before his anger finally boiled over and he decided it was time to get his revenge. So, on January 31st, 2012, he drove to Norm's home and he shot him in the face. A few months later, Carl pled guilty to second-degree murder and he was sentenced to life in prison.
Hi, Spearmint. How are ya? I can't remember if you're the one from the Philippines or Australia. I'm sorry, man.
On the afternoon of August 10th, 2011, Detective Inspector John Finch of the London Metropolitan Police walked through the courtyard of the Radisson Edwardian Hotel in London. This was a massive luxury hotel with more than 400 rooms. Finch navigated past the beautiful greenery and koi ponds and the multiple restaurants until he found the door he was looking for, which was roped off by crime-scene tape with a uniformed officer standing in front of it. Through the doorway,
thanks for clarifying.
Finch could see there were forensic technicians taking photographs and putting down evidence markers. This was a section of the hotel where members of the staff lived in small apartments. And the police had been called here by hotel management because the bodies of 2 workers had been discovered inside, and the 3rd worker was missing. Finch had already been briefed on the basics. The 2 dead were a woman named Alice Adams, who was 20, and a man named Tibor Vass, who was also age 20. And they both had been at the same party in the apartment they were found in the night before. Tibor actually lived in this apartment, and it was actually his roommate, a 31-year-old man named Attila Band, who was the missing 3rd worker. And this was basically all the police knew at this point. They didn't...
Is it like a case fan?
The enemy has slain our lord.
I hope you clean your PC. Why? Why is it slow though? Maybe it's hooked up to the CPU. To the CPU pins. But that's just my guess though. I don't know. Maybe CPU. The fan speed. So it's gonna turn up. It's gonna turn up when yeah, so oh yeah, okay. Well, it's own. I hope it's not wobbly. It can be wobbly because the bearings are worn out or it's really dirty.
Ready for orders. We are tired.
Maybe it's so. I increase my volume so that if I'm using Windows 10. I'm still using Windows 10.
Didn't even have a theory yet on whether the missing Attila was another victim or the killer. They really just didn't know. And so now Finch greeted the officer who was at the door and introduced himself and showed his credentials, and then he ducked under the crime scene tape. And before long, he found himself standing in this small living room type area where the first victim, Alice, was lying in this massive pool of blood on the carpet. She was wearing a shirt, but no pants, but she did have underwear on, and she had a couch cushion that was placed over her face, and there were stab wounds all over her body. One of the forensic...
Okay, does the plum look like this, small, or like this, big? Is it like this, or the female version? Like this? Is it like that?
Eternal Guard! At once! Now! Withdraw! As you say! Orders! Faster!
Oh well. Why would they hack me though? I don't have anything, I'm not well off. I don't have anything of value.
The forest wills it!
So, stab.
Forensics techs warned Finch to be careful where he
Hello,
stepped.
guidance.
So much blood all over the floor, they didn't want Finch to step in. So very carefully, Finch moved around the outside of the room and made his way into the kitchenette, where another forensics tech was picking up items one by one and dusting them for fingerprints and then setting them back down exactly where they were. And among sort of all the items scattered about the kitchenette, Finch noticed there were lots of pill and alcohol bottles. And so now he began to formulate his first theory, that this party they had all been to the night before had gotten way out of hand, and Alice had been attacked in a sudden rage by somebody who very likely knew her. The missing pants suggested a possible sexual element, and the sheer number of stab wounds on the body and the amount of blood spatter really did suggest the killer was in some sort of a frenzy. The cushion that was found over Alice's face suggested that after the killer had sort of calmed down after the murder, maybe they had felt guilty and couldn't bear to look at what they had done, and so they covered her up. To Finch, this basically felt like a substance-fueled crime of passion. However, when he stepped into the bedroom, the scene inside of there told a totally different story. On the bed was Tibor Vass, the second victim, and he was completely naked, and he had been very carefully posed in this strange position where he was on his back and his knees were bent. It was immediately obvious to Finch that Tibor had not been killed here on this bed. There was only a tiny bit of blood on the sheets, and Tibor's body itself was perfectly clean, like it had been washed before being arranged on the mattress. And then, when Finch walked over to get a better look at Tibor's body, he saw that the man's injuries were much neater than Alice's. Tibor only had 2 stab wounds, at least that Finch could see, and both of them were directly to his heart. So this was a very efficient murder. And so after a minute or two, Finch sort of backed up and just found himself feeling really confused, because even though he was in one crime scene, there are 2 victims, 1 crime, it almost felt like it was 2 totally different crimes. Like the murder that took place out there with Alice had been messy and very impulsive seeming, and possibly was because the murderer was, heavily intoxicated. And then this murder of Tibor, it seemed like it was committed by somebody who was much more methodical and potentially even sober. And so Finch couldn't help but wonder, how does this missing roommate, Attila Ban, fit into this picture? Because clearly, that's the piece that seemed to be missing and likely would sort of answer all of his questions. And so at this point, what Finch decided he would do is he would go track down the other hotel workers who had been at this party the night before. See if they knew where Attila was, or what happened to Attila, or why any of this happened. They were there. Maybe they knew something. And so Finch, he turned around and he left the bedroom, and he very carefully navigated back across the living room, being careful not to step in any blood. And then he left the apartment, and as he did, he sort of noticed something strange. But right now he knew the most important thing was going and speaking to those other workers to see what they knew. And so for now, he sort of forgot this strange element he thinks he's discovered, put it over here, and just said, I'll deal with that later. And off he went to go find the other workers. Over the next few hours, Finch spoke to a whole bunch of hotel workers, and they were able to tell him a lot about Alice, Tibor, and Attila. Basically, they were all good friends, they all worked together, and they were known for being very responsible and very hardworking. Alice apparently had only just begun working at the...
And right now, I've been drinking a lot of water. Sometimes I would slip in coffee, but I'm drinking a lot of water. And later, I'm gonna eat our leftover of sinigang and the rice.
hotel a few weeks ago, and...
Oh, yeah, I'm already drooling. I hope no one got the pepper. The long green pepper. I hope you guys can imagine this. Can you imagine the pepper? Boiled until it's soft. It is spicy, but I will eat it with rice anyway. And the rice actually, what do you call this? Let's just say the rice actually soaks up the spicy stuff. It's actually sour. The soup is very sour. And then, I don't know what they use. If it's fish, they can also use beef or pork. I don't know. I'll find out later. But the pepper is it's my favorite. So, I think this one looks like chicken though. Anyway, this is eggplant. Here, this is radish. The white one is radish, and then you have the string beans. And then you also have what we call kangkong or swamp cabbage. Is it swamp cabbage? Yes, it's swamp cabbage. It's a good thing I remember that. Yeah, bye-bye. Sleep well to you. And I noticed that we don't have as much excess anymore in oil. It's good. That's one thing I never eat raw. I don't even want to eat lettuce anymore. I don't want to eat anything raw. With the exception of fruits. No bananas, apples, oranges, melons. Yeah, back to the scary stories.
Coworkers said that
So where were we? Stabbing.
she and Tibor seemed to have some chemistry, but no one was sure whether their relationship went beyond a platonic friendship, because Alice actually did have a boyfriend. And Tibor's roommate, Attila, the one who was missing, was apparently a hotel manager, and recently he'd been named Employee of the Year, and everybody seemed to really love working with him. Finch also learned more about the party that Tibor and Attila had hosted in their apartment the night before, during which the murders, must have happened. And apparently it was really just a small gathering to celebrate Tibor getting into college.
Hold on, let me check something real quick. Man, you know what I should be eating? Lol.
Ten seconds remaining. 5 seconds remaining. Your turn to pick.
And the only people in attendance were Tibor, Attila, Alice, and then 2 other coworkers. Finch had interviewed those 2 other coworkers, and they would say that, during this party, this gathering, everybody had been drinking really heavily. But they insisted that it was a calm night without any conflicts or fights. And they both said that when they left the party, Alice and Tibor and Attila were all alive, awake, and totally fine. And so this information certainly seemed to suggest that Attila did it. I mean, he was the most obvious one that could have committed these murders. The 3 were left alone, 2 wind up dead, the 3rd is missing, Attila. But Attila, despite the fact he was missing, which did sort of make him very suspicious, beyond that, he was like this unbelievably sweet guy who had no problems with anyone. He was like the employee of the year. Like, it just didn't track. Nobody thought Attila could have done this. Nobody. The fact that Alice had a boyfriend, but apparently was, getting close to Tibor and, sort of going beyond being just platonic, that was intriguing to Finch. Coworkers said Alice, flirted with Tibor a lot, and Finch thought it was definitely possible that maybe the boyfriend had come to the apartment and found Alice and Tibor together being sort of inappropriate and killed them out of jealousy. It felt like a very possible theory. However, that would explain why Alice's body was in the state it was in, but that theory would not explain why Tibor's body had been posed in such a bizarre way, or also what happened to Attila. Like, where's Attila? Now, Finch knew that all day his team had been pulling surveillance video from around the hotel. So in the evening, around 7 p.m., he went back to the station to start combing through the footage. He wanted to get his eyes on every single person who entered and left the employee housing area on the night of the killings. The hotel really was covered in cameras, and odds were the killer would be somewhere on those tapes. But later that night, when Finch finally got to the end of all the footage he was given, he was baffled. So the surveillance video didn't actually show the doorway to Tibor and Attila's apartment. It just showed the area around the building that contained the apartment. So Finch could only see who entered and left the building, not the individual apartment. So that was a limitation. But he could see Tibor and Attila and Alice and those other two party guests enter the building before the party. And he could see those same two party guests leave hours later, at almost the exact time they had told him they left. There was no sign of Alice's boyfriend at all, which meant he very likely was not the killer. Otherwise, you'd see him somewhere on this tape, and he just was not there. And so, as disappointing as that was, it, made sense, and it at least sort of progressed the case. But Finch is also thinking, like, the thing the footage also doesn't show is what happened to Attila. Where is Attila? On the morning of August 12th, so 2 days after the bodies were found, Detective Finch went back to the apartment, now with his team of detectives. Attila, at this point, was still missing. Nobody knew what happened to him. And that was actually why Finch was back here with his team. He wanted to take a second look around, not just the building and the apartment, but really the whole area. Because they had traced Attila's phone, and it was pinging off a cell tower right next to the hotel, as if he was, like, still here. But, keep in mind, by this point, police have searched the whole grounds, including every room, all the closets, all the utility areas. They've looked everywhere on this property, and they have not found a trace of him. But Finch thinks, like, what else can I do but just keep on looking? So now, Finch and his team greeted the officer, who was still standing guard by the crime scene door, and the officer let Finch and the other investigators in. And pretty much the second Finch stepped back inside this apartment now for the second time, he knew something was off. Finch had been staring at crime scene photos for the past 2 days obsessively. And as a result, he really had a good feel for how this place had been left. Because remember, when they take photos and when they, dust for prints and all that, they try to leave the scene exactly the way it is because it's all evidence until, the case is solved. But as soon as he walked in, he saw there was a vodka bottle that clearly had been moved. And his first thought is like, are you kidding me? Like, is this us? Are one of our techs moving stuff and not putting it back? Like, are we tampering with our own evidence? Or worse, has somebody somehow broken in here and, like, moved things around, without our own guards knowing about it? Like, what's going on here? And at the same time, Finch is faced with this new reality here. One of the other investigators pointed to the bedroom door, which was closed. And he said that he'd been here when the forensics team had left, and he was positive they had left that door open. And so Finch is, like, totally flabbergasted. He walks over to the door, and he turns the doorknob and tries to open it, but clearly there is something blocking the door, like somebody put something on the other side of the door to keep it from opening up all the way. And so at this point, Finch and the other guys began basically ramming on this door until finally they were able to push it open just enough that they could look inside. And when they did, they find the missing third person, Attila Ban. He's lying face down on the bed, he was naked, and he was covered in blood. It would turn out the murders did take place during that party. The killer was there with Alice, Tibor, and Attila. And the killer, at some point during this party, after those other two guests had left, they saw Alice and Tibor kissing. And it drove them mad with jealousy. And they grabbed a knife, and for a short period, they went into an absolute frenzy, repeatedly stabbing Alice brutally until she was dead, and then turning their attention and stabbing Tibor twice in the heart. And so they had brutally killed these two in a total fit of rage. But the killer knew there were some loose ends inside of this apartment. And so very carefully, they slinked their way into the bedroom, and with that same knife they had just used to kill those two, they cut open the side of the mattress, and they crawled inside, and they waited. When Detective Finch first left the apartment, like that first time he was there, and he's leaving to go speak to the hotel workers, when he opened the apartment door and he began to leave, he stopped because he noticed something weird. He didn't pursue it right then and there because he wanted to prioritize the interviews, but what he noticed was there's so much blood inside of this apartment. It's everywhere. Like the techs are telling me to be careful where I step so I don't track blood around, but he's looking down, like he's just opened the door to the apartment, and there's no blood leaving the apartment. All the blood is contained inside of the apartment. How is that possible? Well, the reason it was possible is because the killer never left the apartment. And so fast forward 2 days to August 12th, the same day that Detective Finch and his team came back to the apartment to do another sweep. So earlier that same day, the killer is still inside the mattress, but they know now they have to deal with Attila. And so very carefully, the killer slides out of the mattress they've masterfully been hiding in for the past 2 days undetected. And for reasons not fully understood, they ended up moving some things in the apartment, like that vodka bottle that was moved. And then also they went back inside the bedroom with Attila, and they barricaded the door shut with something heavy. So they're barricaded inside the very room they've been hiding in, and now it's time to deal with Attila. And so the killer gets on the mattress, and they take their own clothes off, and they cut their wrists. Because it turns out, the killer was Attila. They are the same person. And Attila was madly in love with his roommate, Tibor.
Damn.
At that party, when he saw Tibor kissing Alice, he knew that his love was unrequited. And it threw him into a rage, and he stabbed and
Oh no, he's in love with his homie.
killed both of them. And then he sort of arranged Tibor, his love, in this sort of strange position, which probably was because he had such strong feelings for him. And then also when he attempted to take his own life 2 days later, when he staged his own death on the bed there, he sort of arranged himself in the same pose. But again, he didn't die. And so after Finch and his detectives broke into the room, they found Attila. They were able to get him to a hospital and treat him. And then once he was stable, he was arrested, found guilty of the murders, and sentenced to 26 years in prison.
I'll take a crack at it.
Bro. Damn, bro. He was in love with his homie.
It's not time yet. Already there. On my way.
And I'm dead.
On my way. Yonder.
Your middle tower is under attack.
Oblivion come. Already there. The never reaches long. Close.
Your middle tower is under attack. Your middle tower is under attack. Radiant structures are fortified.
I'm going. Out of my way. I'll take a crack at it. I'll let you jump. Oh, yes. Oh, I'm gone. You win. Out of
Today's
my way.
story comes out of China.
You know, back in 2022 or so, I would listen to Mr. Ballin like every day. Well, not really every day, like
Has been killed.
every video. No. Yeah.
And it is a brutal story. There's just no way to tell it without being sort of graphic. So with that in mind, this is definitely a mature audiences only type of story.
Then most of their stories are most for adults only.
That said, it is a fascinating story, and the ending is something that very few of you are going to see coming. It's going to feel kind of predictable throughout most of the story, and then it's like the end completely changes your impression of the story. But before we get into that story, if you're a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious delivered in story format, then you come to the right place, because that's all we do, and we upload once a week. So, if that's of interest to you, please offer to power wash the like button's house, but be sure you set the machine all the way up so you blow off their shingles and blast all their paint off, and then you just leave. Leave it as is. Also, please subscribe to our channel and turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of our weekly uploads. Okay, let's get into today's story. One Saturday afternoon in November of 1990, a 26-year-old kindergarten teacher named Sue Lixia sat crying on a bench at a train station in the city of Naha, which is located in northeastern China. Sue had just left her husband for good. They'd had a bad marriage for a long time. It was very contentious. They fought all the time. And that morning, they had gotten into this major fight. And for Sue, it was kind of like the final straw. And so she just stormed into the bedroom, grabbed some things, threw it in a bag, and just stormed out. She was done. But Sue really didn't have a plan for what she was going to do once she left the house. And so she found herself just sitting at this train station doing nothing, just staring at the trains going in and out over and over again. And as she sat there, again, not knowing what she's going to do, she suddenly took stock of the fact that very few people were getting on and off of these trains. And in fact, the train station itself was weirdly vacant. So the city of Naha, where Sue was actually fairly small by China's standards, even though there was 70,000 people that lived there. The city sat at the base of this towering mountain, and then all around the city, in the outskirts, was basically just farmland with lots of soy and corn crops. And then as you move closer to the city center, there were lots of things you would expect to see in a city, like tall buildings and, residential and commercial areas. But overall, Naha was just kind of boring. It's like the city was a city, even if it was small, but there was just not much going on. And in fact, if you lived in China, but not in Naha, there was a very good chance you didn't know Naha even existed, like it was kind of irrelevant. However, in the last few months leading up to this moment that Sue is sitting at this train station, the city of Naha had suddenly been put on the map. Everybody knew about this city, because women from Naha were going missing in droves. In fact, Sue herself knew of at least a dozen women who had gone missing over the past few months from Naha. And as these women started going missing, it was making the news all over the country, and women who lived in Naha were acutely aware of the risks of being out alone, in fear that somebody was going to come snatch them up and take them away. In fact, every time Sue would go to work, she would make sure she would walk with other women, like in pairs, to ensure safety. This was a really scary time if you were a woman living in Naha. However, the caveat to the missing women was all of them, to this point, when Sue was sitting at the train station, had been sex workers. And Sue, she thought, in virtue of not being a sex worker and instead being a kindergarten teacher, that somehow she was not actually that vulnerable to being snatched up or, whatever was happening to these women, she just felt like it wouldn't happen to her. But now, as Sue sat at this train station, which again was eerily quiet and vacant, she couldn't help but feel like she had made a bad decision being here. She felt like she could easily become the next woman who...
I remember this one. I've heard about it.
Your bottom tower is under attack.
It's pretty sad.
And I take it. Out of my way.
who went missing from Naha. And so Sue began to think, maybe I should just go back home and
pretty sad,
fix things up with my husband, mostly for her safety, just to go back inside her home.
How people can be coerced like that to do evil.
Oh, I'm gone.
Home and be safe.
Yeah, it's sad.
But before she could stand up to do that, she noticed on the other end of the platform this man who was exceptionally well dressed with this beautiful brown wool coat and fancy pants. He looked like he stepped straight out of a fashion magazine. He came up onto the train platform, and without saying a word, he walked slowly down the platform all the way to where Sue was, and he reached into his pocket and he held out a tissue to her because he saw she was crying. And Sue, she's looking up at the sky, and again, there's nobody else here, and she's very much on edge. and she doesn't know what to do. I mean, it was already creepy that this place was vacant, but it's even stranger to have a random man come up to her and try to initiate some sort of interaction with her. It just felt wrong and weird and very suspicious. But as Sue stared at this guy, trying to figure out what his angle was, she could see that he had kind of kept himself standing back from her, kind of a respectful distance, not trying to crowd her out. And he was looking at her with a very sympathetic look on his face. He was holding this tissue out, and he said to her, "Are you okay?" And he hands the tissue again, like, "Please take it." And there was just something about this guy that felt very sincere, and Sue kind of let her guard down, and she accepted the tissue and wiped the tears from her eyes. She didn't say anything, and then this guy, he said, "Hey, do you mind if I sit with you?" And at this point, Sue said, "Yeah, okay, you can sit down." And so this very handsome, well-dressed man took a seat next to Sue, not right next to her, again, respectful distance from her. And again, he asked her, "Hey, are you doing okay?" And for Sue, whose life had been basically miserable the last few months or even years with this terrible marriage she was in, she wasn't used to being asked if she was okay. And this man, who she didn't know, had caught her at this very vulnerable moment in her life. And it was like all her emotions just came pouring out, and she began sobbing hysterically, telling this guy that no, she was not okay. Her life was in ruins. She had just abandoned her family, and she had no idea what she was going to do. And finally, when Sue stopped telling this guy all about her problems, she felt very embarrassed and kind of looked up at him like she was sorry for even saying as much. But the man, who was very intently listening, he was just nodding along, very sympathetic, and he told Sue that his name was Gia Wang, and that he was a director at a factory not far from here, and if she was open to it, he'd be happy to think about hiring her at the factory, give her a new start potentially. It seemed like that's what she really needed. Then he asked her if she wanted to come back to his house to discuss this job opportunity further. Now with this, even though Sue had really appreciated everything this guy had done to this point, the second he asked her to come back to his house, she's like, red flags are going up. She knew there's something off here. Clearly this guy does have an angle, and it's not to benefit me. And so she looked at him with an absolutely suspicious look, like, no way am I going to your house. I don't know you. Like, I appreciate the tissue, and you letting me cry, but there's no way. But again, as she's staring at him with this suspicious look, the look on Gia's face remained very sympathetic and very gentle, and it almost seemed like he was just going to get up and go, like, hey, I'm sorry for offending you. But before he did get up to leave, Sue said, hold on. Actually, yes, I'll come with you. She didn't know why she agreed to go with him. Maybe it was because her life was so messed up at this point that she was just kind of ready to take chances and be sort of reckless. This was definitely that. Big chance, very reckless. Again, she just felt like, there's something sincere about this guy, and she felt like she could trust him. And so, Sue and Gia stood up, and together they walked down the train platform, not saying much. They went downstairs, they went out to the street, and they walked a couple of blocks to where Gia's street was. And as soon as they turned the corner, and he showed Sue which house was his, Sue looked up, and whatever hesitation she had had still to that point about following this stranger to his house were gone, because she saw his house was beautiful. It wasn't that it was so grand or anything, it totally fit with the neighborhood, but it was very well maintained and totally felt on brand for a guy who was so well dressed and so well manicured and frankly so handsome. So Gia led the way to the front door of his house. He unlocked the door, he opened it up, and then he gently gestured for Sue to come on inside. And so she did, she walked past him, Gia followed her in, and the two of them took off their shoes and made their way to the kitchen where Gia brewed some tea for them, and then they both sat down and began to sip their tea and talk about this job opportunity. And so for a few minutes, Gia is telling Sue all about the role and what she might be doing, and Sue is kind of asking general questions about it, but for the most part, she just kind of enjoyed being in the presence of somebody who seemed to care about her. But after she finished her entire glass of tea, suddenly Gia, who had been talking this whole time about the factory, was stopped. It was like he was waiting for her to drink at his time to drink. And as soon as she was done with her cup, Gia, again, he went quiet and just stared at Sue with this kind of sinister look on his face. He was very pleased with what was going on. And at that point, Sue looked down at her teacup and then back at Gia. Then suddenly she began to feel very drowsy. It was like her vision was beginning to go. And she realized Gia clearly had poisoned her. There was something inside of her tea. And so before she could do anything, everything went black. A couple of weeks later, just a few blocks away from where Sue met Gia at the train station, a police officer named Zhang was standing behind his desk at the police station when a very concerned-looking elderly couple came inside. Now, this couple was here to speak with Zhang about a missing person, but the missing person was not Sue. She had been missing for 2 weeks now, nobody had seen her, but no one had reported her missing. Her husband had just assumed that Sue had left him, and that's why he hadn't seen her, and so he had naturally not reported that. Again, nobody else knew she was missing, so keep that in mind. Officer Zhang has no idea about Sue and Jia, none of it. But when this elderly couple came in to make a missing person report, Officer Zhang was not the least bit surprised. It was now December of 1990, and over the past 6 months, 20 women out of Naha had suddenly gone missing. Remember, Sue is not one of those 20. The 20 are mostly sex workers who went missing at that same train station where Sue met Jia. And so Officer Zhang was used to making all these missing person reports. But candidly, the police actually felt like, because these were sex workers that were going missing, they weren't sure if they were actually being abducted or if they were simply getting on a train and kind of leaving town to go work somewhere else. And so really there wasn't a whole lot of investigation happening to figure out why so many of these women were going missing. But again, Officer Zhang is not surprised that they're telling him they want to file a missing person report. But when Zhang took this elderly couple to an interview room to talk to them about whoever was missing in their lives, when this couple spoke, Officer Zhang knew this was different. Because the couple was not reporting another missing woman from Naha who also happened to be a sex worker. Instead, they were reporting that a man was missing, a businessman. However, the details of his disappearance sounded eerily similar to all these sex working women who had also gone missing. This guy was last seen at that same train station where Sue had met Jia, and then nobody had seen him, and so that's why they were here. And so Officer Zhang, he wrote up their report, and then he told the couple that, very likely this man is okay and he'll show up at some point under his own steam, but he told them the police would look into it and they'd be in touch. However, as this couple got up and turned around and left, Officer Zhang couldn't help but feel like this missing man and all these missing women went missing from the same place. And it's the same city and it's the same pattern over and over again, but now we have a man. And even though Zhang wanted to write it off as an anomaly, he started to wonder if this missing man was connected to all these missing women. Because by January of 1991, so 2 months after Sue had gone missing without a trace and still had not been reported by anybody, and 6 weeks after that elderly couple reported that man missing, another 5 people from Naha had gone missing, 2 more women and 3 more men. And so now the police in Naha were looking at 26 people, men and women, that had all gone missing very recently out of Naha, and nobody had a clue what happened to them.
It's pretty scary and at the same time even sadder for me.
And importantly, because now there were men who were not sex workers who were going missing, the police couldn't just write this whole thing off as, oh, these sex working women are just going to another city to go do their work there. Like that was not a possibility anymore. Clearly something bad was happening, and the police knew they really needed to do a real investigation. So finally, in early spring of that year, the police in Naha formed a task unit and legitimately began investigating all these disappearances. Amazingly, there was no information. There was nothing. These people went missing and nobody heard from them. There was no evidence of where they went. There was not even any sign that anything bad happened to them because no bodies had been found. There was no evidence of really anything happening. All the police knew is these 26 people, not including Sue, so she would be the 27th person, had been at this train station and then vanished. And that's all they knew. And it got to the point where this story really began to spread around China, and it became like this running joke that if you don't want to live, go to Naha. Because everybody assumed there had to be some sort of serial killer or something happening there who was just roaming the streets, picking people off. Thank you to BetterHelp for sponsoring today's video. I have in my life similar position for help.com. By late summer of 1991, when really this story had taken hold across the country and was becoming a bigger and bigger deal because there was absolutely no resolution here, police had no idea what was going on, well, the whole situation got a whole lot worse because now, in addition to people suddenly vanishing at the train station in Naha, more people were also going missing in other cities nearby Naha, but all along the same train line that left out of Naha. So more train stations, more disappearances, all around the area. Not just the city of Naha, but all around. And by the fall of that year, when over 30 people had gone missing all the same way from these train stations all around Naha, the police still had absolutely nothing to go on. All they had is, here are these people, here's where they were, they vanished, they got nothing else. No bodies, no evidence, nothing. But all that would change on October 22nd, 1991, roughly a year after Sue met Gia at the train station in Naha and then drank that drugged tea. On that October day in 1991, so again a year after the disappearance of Sue, police at this train station, 1,700 miles away from the city of Naha, were doing random stops of commuters on the train platform. This had nothing to do with the ongoing investigation into all these missing people. This was just like public safety stuff, where the police were kind of just walking around, looking for people who looked suspicious, and then checking in on them to make sure they weren't doing anything illegal. And on this particular day, at this train station far away from Naha, one of these officers spotted this very handsome guy in a beautiful brown wool coat and very fancy pants and shoes, and he stood out a lot because of, frankly, how beautiful he was. And so the police officer saw him, and this very handsome guy looked up, and he saw the police officer, and it was like immediately he did something very suspicious. He reached down, grabbed a bag, and quickly turned around and began walking away. And at the same time, two other people who were right near this very handsome guy did the same thing. They grabbed bags off the ground, quickly turned around, fell in line with this handsome guy, and began quickly walking away from the police. And so the police obviously...
Oops.
It's like immediately he did something very suspicious. He reached down, grabbed a bag, and quickly turned around and began walking away. And at the same time, two other people who were right near this very handsome guy did the same thing. They grabbed bags off the ground, quickly turned around, fell in line with this handsome guy, and began quickly walking away from the police. And so the police obviously are totally suspicious. They run across the platform, and they manage to stop all three of them, and they turn them around, and they say, "Show me your bags, open them up." And the police, they would open up these bags, and they contain drugs. And so right away, these three know they are caught, but they don't say anything. They just stand there, and they're totally silent, as the police are asking them, like, "What are these drugs? Where are you going with these? What's going on here?" They're not talking. And so finally, the police go, "Give me your IDs right now." So all three of them cough up their IDs. And a very handsome guy with a beautiful brown wool coat and fancy clothes, well, that was Gia Wang. The same Gia Wang who had gone with Sue into his house and given her the drugged tea. But again, these police officers are only concerned about the drugs. They don't know anything about these guys. They don't know that Gia met Sue and did this thing at his house with the tea. That wasn't even reported to police. Nobody knew about it. But these police knew they had caught these three people with these bags of illegal drugs, so they brought them back to the station and began to question each of them. And when they spoke to Gia, Gia said nothing. However, when they spoke to the two other people that were with Gia, one of them began to crack. It was obvious they had more to tell about these drugs, and they were kind of holding back tears, like they were very upset. And one of the interrogators, sensing one of these people was prepared to confess to something, instead of really drilling down on them, he was very comforting. And he offered them a blanket and said, "Here, take this blanket, relax, it's okay. You can tell me what's on your mind, it's okay." And that just totally broke this person. And they said, "These drugs are nothing. You need to see what's in Gia's house. That will put these drugs to the side. They won't matter. What's in his house is horrible." The next day, a phone rang in the police station in Naha, and Officer Zhang picked it up, and it was one of the officers who interviewed these three people with drugs and got this whole horrible confession about what was inside of this guy Gia's house, and he told Zhang all about it. And as Zhang is listening to this, his eyes went wide because he knew this had to be connected to all these people going missing. Like, this has to be it. And so as soon as he hung up the phone, Officer Zhang rounded up 20 other police officers and 10 forensic doctors to go search Gia's house. And when they got there, the house from the outside looked just as beautiful as when Sue had seen it for the first time, and felt like her reservations about Gia had gone down because of how wonderful his house looked. But as soon as all those police officers and the forensic doctors stepped inside of Gia's house, he wasn't home, there was nobody there. When they went inside, they were instantly hit with this horrible, horrible smell inside the house. Even though things are neat and beautiful inside too, there was something bad inside this house. And the smell seemed to be coming from the basement. And so at some point, Officer Zhang and the other officers, they got to the door, they opened it up, and they looked down, and all they could see was just this dark room down there. And the smell was so strong, but they pulled their shirts up over their faces, and they went down the stairs, and when they got down there, they couldn't see anything. It's totally dark. But the smell at this point was so overpowering that a couple of the officers almost fainted. And so literally they had to leave the house fearing they were breathing in toxic chemicals or something, and they had to wear gas masks just to go back into the house and back down into the basement. And when they got back down there, now wearing their masks, it didn't seem like there was anything down there that could produce such an awful smell. Like there was just nothing down there. But eventually one of the officers moved to the middle of the basement, right in the middle, and they realized there was an opening. and they looked down into it, and they couldn't believe what they saw. And at the same time, somebody upstairs made an equally horrifying discovery because they discovered a videotape, a VHS cassette, that contained this horrible footage that effectively explained what was going on inside of that pit in the basement. But to understand that, we need to go back a year to when Sue met Gia at the train station. She went back to his house and drank the drug tea and blacked out. After Sue drank that tea, she didn't die. Gia did not kill her. Instead, she woke up a few hours later being totally confused, and she was immediately hit by this horrible smell, but it was totally pitch black. She can't see anything, and she began feeling her hands around her, and she felt stone everywhere she touched, and eventually she realized she was in what felt like the bottom of a well. But it wasn't water she was standing in. She was standing in something that almost felt like jelly. She began kind of touching it to figure out what it was. She could not tell, but she couldn't help but feel like the things around her were kind of moving, like they were alive. And suddenly, a lid that clearly sat atop of this pit began to slide over above her. And so suddenly light was coming down into this pit. And at first, Sue looked up and she didn't see anything. But then she looked down and realized what was all around her. It was people, dead people, and potentially even half-alive people that were just stuffed into this big pit. They were all kind of decaying or, slowly dying or whatever it was, and she's just standing amongst it all. And then she looks up and she sees it's Gia, the beautiful man who had brought her here. He's standing up there looking down at her with a smile on his face. And Sue immediately pleads with him to please spare me, don't kill me. And Gia, he looks down at her kind of inquisitively. And he says, should I lift you out of there? Will you do anything I tell you to do? And Sue said, yes, I'll do anything. Just get me out of here, please. And so Gia, he reached down, he grabbed Sue, and he pulled her up and out of this pit inside of this basement. A few days later, Sue was back at the train station where she had met Gia for the first time, but this time she was alone. And she walked up onto that train platform with no intention of riding a train. Instead, as soon as she got up there, she began looking around, and then she spotted a businessman who was sitting on a bench. And she walked over to him, and she sat down next to him, and we don't know exactly what she said, but we think what she said was something maybe sexually suggestive or, something along those lines, and she's holding his shoulders and touching his hand. She doesn't know this man, and this man is very caught off guard by this, but he's kind of going along with it.
Man, now I'm even more afraid of social interactions.
And before long, she takes this businessman's hand, they stand up, and they walk out of the train station down to the street and make their way a couple blocks over to Gia's house. And when they get there, Sue leads them to the front door, she opens it up, she brings the man inside, the door shuts, they take their shoes off, and Sue leads this man into the kitchen where Gia is waiting with a wire between each hand. And as soon as this businessman walked into the kitchen, Gia pounced on him, wrapped the wire around his neck and held it until the man passed out. And then he released the wire. And then Gia and Sue took this man, they lifted him up, and they carried him down into the basement, laid him out on the floor. So he's not in the pit, he's just out in the middle of the basement floor. Then Gia stepped away, picked up a video camera, turned it on, and began to film. He was filming the man on the ground, and also Sue. And Sue, she knew what to do. She was going to do anything she was told to do. So she climbs on top of this still very much alive businessman who's just been knocked unconscious, and she straddles him so she's looking down at his head. And she picks up a knife, and she holds it in front of her, and then she looks up at Gia, who at this point has zoomed the camera in. She can hear the sound, the mechanics inside of the camera as it's zooming in on what she's about to do. And then she raises the knife over her head and drives it into this man's chest. The video that Gia shot of Sue murdering this man was the video police found on the first floor of the house shortly after police had found this horrible pit in Gia's basement. It would turn out that Gia Wang was absolutely the serial killer who was responsible for all these people going missing from the train stations. He would abduct them just like he did Sue, and he would bring them to his house, and then he would do horrible, horrible things to them, and eventually he would chuck their bodies into this pit. And so when he abducted Sue, he actually thought that when he drugged her, that he had killed her, and he had chucked her into the pit, believing she was dead. But when Sue had woken up inside of that pit, when he opened it up and looked down, and there she was, fully alive, he had an idea. Well, why don't I turn Sue into a murderer like me? She can help me. And so that was the condition for her being pulled out of this pit, that she would assist him in murdering people, and she agreed to do it. And so the reason the profile of victims changed from sex working women to random men is because those are the people that Sue went after. She began targeting men. And so when that elderly couple came in and reported to Officer Zhang that a man was missing, that was Sue's first victim, the man who had been seen on video being stabbed in the chest by Sue. Now, nobody to this day understands why Sue actually went along with this. Like she was
No, it's so sad how people would be coerced like that.
Don't cross my path.
pulled up out of the pit, but then when she was told to go to the train station and find your first victim, it's unclear why she didn't just go to the police and say, hey, there's a serial killer, Gia, here's his house, here's where he is, go get him. For some reason, she just did what he said. And in fact, Sue was not the only person who was brought into this murdering scheme. He managed to convince 3 other people, including his ex-wife, to also commit murders for him. And all 3 of those people also had ample opportunity to flee and tell police, but they didn't. All of these people just did what Gia wanted without asking any questions. It was like he had absolute control over these people. That is, until that day in October of 1991, when those police officers doing a public safety check spotted Gia along with 2 accomplices fleeing with drugs. They stopped them and they got them back to the station, and one of his accomplices finally broke and told the truth. And the person who told the truth, the accomplice who broke, was Sue. She was there with him at the train station. Nobody knew she was missing, and she was the one who, when offered a blanket and was told, tell us the truth, she came clean. Ultimately, it was this police officer's kindness that broke her. In Gia's basement, inside of that horrible pit, right in the middle of it, were 42 bodies, 24 women and 18 men. In the end, Gia and all 4 of his forced accomplices, including Sue, were sentenced to death, and they were executed on January 24th, 1992. Today, the city of Naha is still
that's before I was born.
just as infamous as it was in the 90s when these murders took place. And in fact, the nickname for Naha is now just Bandit City to reflect what happened there.
What?
In the end, Gia and all 4 of his forced accomplices, including Sue, were sentenced to death, and they were executed on January 24th, 1992. Today, the city of Naha is still just as infamous as it was in the 90s when these murders took place. And in fact, the nickname for Naha is now just Bandit City to reflect what happened.
Bandit City.
Oblivion.
Okay.
I want to create a mildly effective... I want to make a mildly effective cold medicine made exclusively out of Egyptian fire ants. Take its horn off its head and beat it to death. Die. You die. Turned and leapt head first out the glass window. Yes! Got up on its flippers and began chasing us down the cave.
You know, when I make my submissions, sometimes I would do second takes and stuff.
A nice hot maga musk. And we settled on a piping hot plate of eagle tonsils, your smoked chicken gallbladder eggnog.
Damn, that's why... Man, I'm even more afraid of social interactions now. I don't want to be a victim. I don't wanna turn into an accomplice like that. Or I'm just making more excuses. I'm just making more excuses because I don't wanna interact with people in real life. Yeah, I think that's what it is.
Radiant structures are fortified.
See, I told you it's scary and sad at the same time.
Today, we're going to look at 3 places you can't go and people who went there anyway. But before we get into those stories, if you're a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious delivered in story format, then you've come to the right place
Top 20 Dumb Dudes.
because that's all we do, and we upload once a week. So, if that's of interest to you, please sneak into the Like Button's house and replace all of their family photos of pictures of you wearing their clothes in the same poses. Also, please subscribe to our channel and turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of our weekly uploads. Okay, let's get into today's stories.
Your bottom tower is under attack.
At 6:30 p.m. on May 14th, 1955, a 24-year-old man named Donald Giroux stood next to his friend, 28-year-old Murray Anderson, on the shore of a natural spring in the state of Georgia. The spring was called
Hey
Radium.
man, if I don't know. I'm not going to the US anytime soon. Or in the foreseeable future, but Georgia sounds nice to me. I don't know.
Springs, because literally there was radium in the water. Radium
Shit.
is a naturally occurring, highly radioactive metallic element, but there were such low levels of it in the water that it wasn't really a hazard. However, the radium did have an effect on the water. It made it practically neon blue. And so it was
Hell
totally
yeah.
mesmerizing. I mean, you look at this thing and you know there's something different about this spring. Also, this spring was incredibly deep. So Donald and Murray were both members of the US Navy. And so naturally, they spent a lot of time, in and around water, because that's what the Navy does. They work in and around water. But ironically, it was actually when Donald and Murray were not working that they spent the most amount of time in the water, because in their off time, they were recreational scuba divers. Except back in 1955, recreational scuba diving was totally not safe. And that was because, underwater diving certainly existed at the time. I mean, institutions like the Navy, they were prolific divers. But civilians did not really dive on their own. And so as a result, if you wanted to recreationally scuba dive, well, you didn't really have access to good equipment or even proper equipment. I mean, there just wasn't anything available to you. And so for people like Donald and Murray who did want to go explore the underwater abyss on their own, they had to literally make their own diving equipment, like their own oxygen tanks and their own flashlights and goggles. I mean, all of it. I mean, it was amateur. It was homemade equipment. And so that's what made it really dangerous. On top of, when you're underwater diving, as I've done myself, a lot of things can go wrong. And so that's also dangerous. And so the whole thing, it's asking for problems. But for Donald and Murray, it was actually the danger associated with recreational diving that made it so appealing. They liked the idea that other people were scared to go underwater, with their DIY equipment.
Come on, man, it's that kind of behavior. It's that kind of behavior that puts them on these stories. See what I mean?
For Donald and Murray, they loved it. They got a thrill out of it. And on top of that, they kind of felt like explorers. They got to go to places underwater where literally nobody else had gone before. In fact, they had already gone to other locations and mapped out, tunnels and underwater cave systems and all these different things that literally nobody else had done before. And they loved it. And today was going to be no different, because there were sections in Radium Springs that nobody had mapped, and they were going to go down there and see it for themselves. So after the two men looked at each other and nodded and just kind of gave the signal it was time to begin the dive, they donned their amateur
No, not really.
equipment, their oxygen tanks and their goggles and their flippers, and then they walked into the neon blue water and submerged. A few minutes later, Donald and Murray had traveled about 70 feet straight down the water column. And at this point, the light is really fading. They can't really see too well. They did have flashlights that they had rigged up that they had waterproofed. But at this point, down 70 feet, it's getting pretty dark. But right in front of them, off to the side, was this huge entrance, this underwater tunnel entrance. And this was actually a well-known cavern. Like, this is actually where other recreational divers...
Oh, man. Do you know about those memes that became popular, I don't know, last year, 2 years ago? Cave explorers with loving families. And they crawl into places like these.
Would go to if they went to Radium Springs. It was this cavern. But while the entrance to the cavern had been sort of mapped out and searched, there were all these little spidery offshoots once you got into this cavern that had not been explored. And so what Donald and Murray were going to do is go into the cavern and then basically start, splintering off and seeing what else was in there and map.
Let's read. Cave divers leaving their wives and kids at home when they hear a new cave named Lucifer's Pit. With the entrance the size of a walnut. Oh. Cave divers with a loving family after they see a cave with 0% survival rate. Cave divers with a loving family of 4 go in a hole that is the same size as an apple. And I'm never gonna do that kind of thing. Cave divers with a loving wife, 3 children, and a stable life. When they see the cave of no return with 0% survival rate. Yeah, that's what it is.
It out. Now, as much as Donald and Murray did like the sort of risks associated with this activity, they weren't completely reckless. They had attached a dive line when they had gone into the spring that they attached to the surface and they fed down with them. It's a 200-foot line, and they carried it with them. The lead diver would basically unspool as they went. The 2 divers would be right next to each other, and they'd be holding on to this line. And so when they would go into this cavern, if for some reason they got turned around or, if they got, totally confused, whatever it was, they could always just follow their line back out of the cavern, back up to the surface. This was not like rocket science. This is something that divers today still do. So using a dive line, very common practice, and Donald and Murray were doing just that. And so they went into this cavern, they got their dive line spooling out, and everything was totally fine. Once they were inside of this cavern, all the light completely went away. I mean, the cavern was relatively spacious, but, the light is coming straight down, and this tunnel entrance is basically, horizontal. So once they're inside of this cavern, it's utterly pitch black. But Donald and Murray had dove other underwater cave systems. They knew going in how dark this cave system was going to be. They had their flashlights, that they had jerry-rigged to be waterproof. And they're holding on to their line, and they're going into this cavern looking for their first offshoot. But as they're going into this cavern, there's all this silt, all this...
Man, I hope more things like that make me laugh today. I think that the laughter is good for me.
8 knots and full ahead.
I don't know, adding 12 seconds more to my life.
By the nether reaches. Wandering.
Well, I'm gonna die here. Told ya.
It's mud that's kind of caked to the walls and the floor that began getting kicked up from their flippers and bumping into it. And before long, because of the silt and the lack of light, they could basically only see maybe 6 inches in front of them. Like even shining their light, all they'd see is all the silt. And so very quickly, the visibility basically fell to 0. But, again, they're going in knowing this is the environment they're going into. They're confident, they're cool, they're moving along. But as the 2 divers were continuing through the cavern, getting deeper and deeper, and it's starting to get more and more restrictive, the deeper they go, they were about to go into this offshoot when Donald suddenly started seeing all these air bubbles coming up against him. And now he can't quite see where they're coming from. But
Those look very beautiful. Look behind them. It's a freaking... Looks like a turquoise water with very nice greens.
there's only one place that an air bubble could be emerging from, and that's from his oxygen tank. And so clearly there's some sort of issue. He can't see because it's so dark. He also has homemade equipment, and so the risk of catastrophic failure is pretty high with his equipment. And so he begins trying to figure out where this leak is coming from, checking his equipment, trying to make it stop, but he can't. He can't really communicate to Walter, who's got the spool of dive line, who's continuing straight forward into this offshoot. He can't quite tell him what's going on. They can't actually speak to each other. Again, it's pitch black, there's silt, it's sort of, claustrophobic and stressful. And so ultimately, Donald grabs Murray and tries to shake him and sort of signal, hey, I got an issue here, but he had no way of knowing if Murray actually understood. But Donald, he knew he just had to get out of there. He had to go back to the surface and fix his issue before it got way worse. And so, even though he knew he was kind of leaving his buddy here, he's thinking, okay, Murray's got the dive line, he's experienced, I just grabbed him, everything's gonna be okay. And Donald turned around, kicked up more silt, and held onto that dive line, but now followed it back out of the cavern and back up to the surface. And when he got to the surface, he took a big breath. He was saved, he checked his equipment and realized, wherever the issue was, and he was actually able to fix the issue. And so before long, after only being on the surface for a couple of minutes, he had put his equipment back on, he was back in the water, and following the dive line back down towards the cavern. As Donald began his descent down towards that cavern, 70 feet down, the whole time he's holding onto the dive line, making sure he doesn't lose that. But really what he's focused on is checking his equipment, because as he's going down, he's got basic visibility here. It's not going to be like in the cavern where you can't see anything. And so as he's going down, he's checking his equipment and just making sure that there isn't a leak. And by the time he got all the way down 70 feet and the dive line turned and went into that cavern, Donald was feeling pretty good that his equipment was good, it was not malfunctioning, and it was safe to go back into the cavern with Murray. And so that's what he does. He's got his flashlight in one hand, he's got the dive line in the other, and he's now looking straight into this dark opening of this cavern. And in Donald goes, the whole time holding on to that dive line. And pretty much immediately, once inside the cavern, the flashlight became useless because, again, the silt's still kicked up. There's no current running through this cavern, so the silt is not going anywhere. But either way, Donald knew what he was doing. He was going straight in there to connect with Murray and continue this dive and see what else is in here. Map it out
If I were them, I would stop.
for other divers. And so into the cavern he goes. He's holding the dive line in one hand. He's got his flashlight and he's going deeper and deeper into this cavern. And the whole time he's expecting at any moment he's just going to bump into Murray. But he just keeps going and going deeper and deeper into the system. The walls are getting tighter and tighter around him.
It's time to stop.
Eventually, he reaches the very end of the dive line, 200 feet at this point, deep into this cavern. And there's no Murray. Murray's gone. Now Donald, he's looking around. Remember, it's total darkness. All he's got is this flashlight, which basically just illuminates the silt that's been kicked up all around him. But where he is at this exact moment, the silt wasn't too bad. It was just like this abyss all around him. It's totally black. There's nothing around him. And in a sudden panic, Donald thinks, oh my goodness, I'm so far into this cavern, I haven't found Murray, like something's happened to him. He's run out of air or he's gotten lost. Like, how could he have let go of the dive line? What's going on here? And so Donald immediately just starts going down to the bottom of the cave and searching the ground.
At that point, if I couldn't find my body, I'd ask for help.
thinking that, maybe Murray got to this point and passed out and sunk to the bottom, but he gets to the bottom of the cave, there's nothing there, he starts feeling the tunnels, there's nothing, and at this point he's kicked up even more silt, and so, he really can't see anything. And he's thinking, it took me a while to get in here, and I'm running low on oxygen right now. I need to get help immediately, because Murray, he's gonna run out of time really quickly. And so Donald turns around, and holding onto this dive line, he pulls himself out of the cavern, he goes back to the surface. Some part of him was hoping that when he got up there that he would just magically see Murray waiting for him, but nope, he's all alone, there's nobody here. And at that point, Donald took off his gear and he contacted authorities. Not long after that, 2 commercial divers, along with an entire U.S. Navy dive team, arrived at Radium
Man, look how many people they dragged along with them.
Springs and began looking for Murray. And they searched and they searched and they couldn't find him until 8 a.m. the next morning, 12 hours after Donald had surfaced. It would turn out, when Donald had that malfunction that caused him to leave the cavern and leave Murray behind and go to the surface and fix himself and then go back down again, well, in that space of time that he was away from Murray, Murray continued to spool out the dive line, maybe not necessarily knowing that Donald had left him at this point, and Murray got all the way to the end of the dive line, 200 feet, and at that point, in this uncharted tunnel he was in, somehow or another, Murray became disconnected from the dive line. Maybe he let go of it, maybe he bumped into something, we don't know, but either way, he let go of the dive line, basically right at the end of the dive line. And when Donald came back down and got to the end of that dive line and discovered Murray wasn't there, well, what he didn't know is that Murray actually was just a couple of feet away. He was basically right above him, because that's where Murray was ultimately found. He had drowned literally feet away from the dive line, but Donald, he couldn't see him, and in a total panic state, in an effort to find Murray, Donald began fumbling around, going down and rubbing up against the bottom and the walls, kicking up all this silt. And you gotta figure at this exact moment, Murray, who's very much alive at this point, almost certainly, is right above him, and now his visibility, which was already terrible, he's probably scared to death because he's looking for this dive line, and now the silt is just getting kicked up all around him. He probably knows Donald's nearby. He's swimming around looking for Donald. Donald's looking for Murray. They swim right past each other. It's absolute madness. But then eventually Donald just vanishes because he's going to find help. And Murray is left all by himself in total darkness, disoriented, terrified, has no idea where the dive line is. Silt is making it impossible to know what direction he's even going. And so in Murray's final moments, he just scrambled around trying to find his way out again until he eventually drowned, again, just feet away from his dive line, the very thing that would have brought him to safety. Hey guys, did you know you can get your strange, dark, and mysterious fix anytime, anywhere with the Mr. Ballin podcast on Amazon Music? Well, you can. There are tons of stories waiting to be binged right now, plus there are exclusive stories on there that have never been shared on this YouTube channel. Amazon Music listeners get to listen to new episodes an entire month before everybody else. You can also listen to the other show, Mr. Ballin's Medical Mysteries, 2 weeks early, totally ad-free on Amazon Music. If you're already a Prime member, well, you already have access to those 2 shows, plus hundreds of other top podcasts, ad-free, all at no extra cost. That's right, your Prime membership includes Amazon Music absolutely free. So, if you're ready to dive deeper into strange, dark, and mysterious stories, well, go download the Amazon Music app today and listen to the Mr. Ballin podcast and also Mr. Ballin's Medical Mysteries. Now, back to today's story. On May 28, 2022, a photographer named April Bertucci, along with 2 of her friends, snuck towards this abandoned funeral home in Flint, Michigan. The funeral home was a big...
Why would you sneak into that? See? Places you shouldn't go, and people went there anyways.
Big brick building right off a main road in the center of the city. And April and her two friends knew there were lots
Man, it's a good thing I live a boring life, away from those kinds of trouble.
of people that were kind of looking in this direction, and it was illegal to go into this property, and so very
Man,
careful.
it's illegal to go. Man, at this point, they deserve it. Okay? It's illegal to go, and they're still going. They're still sneaking in. Okay? No sympathy for them.
Carefully, they snuck their way towards the back door of the building, and they saw the door was, completely attached to its hinges. It was in good shape, appeared to be locked, but they thought, what the heck? They walked up to the door, to look around. April reached down, tried the handle, and it pulled right open. And as soon as this happened, April was psyched, because not only was she a photographer, but she was also an urban explorer, which meant she would sneak into places like this, abandoned buildings and other man-made sites, just to have a look around. One, because it was fun and exciting,
It was
but
fun.
also because she got to use her photography, taking cool pictures of places like this funeral home. And so April's friends were also into urban exploring, and as soon as this door came open, it was like, oh my goodness, I can't believe we're going to get to explore this legendary site. So this funeral home had been shut down about 5 years earlier because of reports of unsanitary conditions inside. Anonymous reporters had gone in and discovered that there were literally like human remains out. There were up to 40 bodies being stored in one room with no air conditioning, so they're just rotting. There's maggots all over the place. There's embalming liquids on the ground. There's blood everywhere. I mean, basically, this place was like the site of a horror movie. And so the state comes in, they shut this place down, and the owner, after being shut down, just abandons the building, just leaves it exactly the way they had left it. I mean, the bodies were removed by the state, but all the equipment for the funeral home was just left behind. Everything was sealed up, and that was that. And the place was deemed off limits. But naturally, urban explorers found out about this and began going in to see this horror show for themselves. And so April and her friends, they had heard about this place and immediately were like, we gotta go in there. We gotta see it for ourselves.
Okay, hold on. Urban explorers. Okay, I'm gonna get some coffee. It will only take me like 1 to 2 minutes. We'll see. Hold on. Okay, I'm back. I just got the instant coffee with some fresh milk in it. That's all. I also looked at the sinigang. Yeah. And it's pork. Yeah. I like the pork fat. That's my favorite part. That's my favorite part for everything. I mean, fish belly, the fatty part of, beef, and just like this. Then do you see the fat? Like, this is the skin, this is the fat. That's my favorite. That, or whatever veggies are there, and then the pepper, and then with the rice. I'll finish all of the rice. I think that if I left that there for like 7 more hours, it's gonna be bad. Cannot be eaten anymore. Okay, what? Back. Where were we? Urban explorers trespassing. Urban explorers trespassing at a morgue. Was it a morgue or a funeral parlor? Whatever.
And so they hopped in a car and they drove over 3 hours from Ohio to Michigan just to check this place out. And now here they were, door open, and in they go.
They even wasted a lot of gas.
Once the door shut behind them, April and her two friends were looking down this long, dark hallway. It's totally silent inside. The walls were made out of cinder block that had been painted white, but the paint was all chipping off, and they had their flashlights out, and it's dark and creepy, and they're looking down the hallway, and just for a second, they just stop and listen to see if anybody else is inside of here moving around. Maybe other urban explorers, or even other animals or anything, squatters, they don't know, but they're sitting there for a second just listening, and they don't hear anything. And so, with April in front, they begin walking down this hallway. And as they're walking, there's all this trash on the ground. It's totally eerie as they're walking. Every little sound is sort of startling them. They're kind of laughing as they're going. And eventually, April stops in front of this first door that she sees, the first door off the hallway, and it's closed. And right across the center of this door is this big caution sign saying, stay back. And then underneath the caution sign, it says formaldehyde. And so April and her friends knew that, okay, well, formaldehyde is a chemical used to embalm bodies, something funeral homes did. And so they know that behind this door very likely was the embalming room, where funeral homes would literally pump dead bodies full of formaldehyde and prep the bodies, to be presented at the wake, before they're actually laid to rest. It's like this is where actual dead bodies are manipulated. And so April and her friends are pretty excited. And so April, she opens up the door, and look inside of this room, and it's very eerie. It's pretty much vacant. But in the center of this room, it's all dark. They have their flashlights, right? In the center of the room is this metal table, this standalone metal table of a gurney. And it's where the dead body would be placed as they're being embalmed. And then on the walls, all around, are all these shelves with very...
Oh my, is this an actual venue?
Center of this room, it's all dark, they have their flashlights, right? In the center of the room is this metal table, this standalone metal table. It's like a gurney. And it's where the dead body would be placed as they're being embalmed. And then on the walls, all around, are all these shelves with various tools and...
Oh man, you know what? As morbid as it seems, I can't help but imagine myself, after I pass away. Man, I wanna be cremated. I don't want anyone to be paying fees just to keep me at some free cemetery. And If you can legally spread my ashes in the ocean, I'd really love that.
And,
Because I'm a freaking... I don't know.
Vials of various milky liquids. There's a saw, there's scissors, there's scalpels on the ground. There's, fabric that appears to have some sort of bodily fluids on it. I mean, this really looks like the scene of a horror movie. But for April and her friends, it's like, this is a gold mine. I mean, this is what we came here for. And so April and her friends, for the next little bit, they just began walking all around the embalming room. April taking photos, and her friends and April kind of moving things around, seeing what was in there. And then eventually, they left and continued to search the building, and they found a chapel where there were caskets laying around. They also went into a garage, and they found there was an old hearse just left inside the garage. I mean, the place really was as creepy as everybody said it was. And so it was sometime around discovering the garage that the girls had gone back to the main hallway, and they discovered this other door that they hadn't seen when they were searching over the first 30 minutes
And I wouldn't open that.
they had been in there. And this door led to this ominous stairwell that went down into what appeared to be the basement. And so at this point, the girls felt like they had sort of searched the entire main floor, and, the two friends, not April, they really wanted to go down these steps and explore the basement. They'd been here long enough that it seemed pretty clear that they were the only ones there. It had been totally quiet, and even though it was creepy, ultimately, they sort of felt safe at this point. And April did too, but she also was having a great time still taking pictures on the first floor. And so at this point, the group decided to split up. The two friends would go down into the basement.
One of my teammates got me with a grenade. Thank you very much.
And April, for a little bit longer, would stay up on the first floor and just continue taking photos, and then she would join them. And so, no big deal, they split up, the girls go down to the basement, April's taking her photos, doing her thing, and just a couple of minutes later, April hears her friends in the basement, through the floors, yelling out something to the effect of, "Oh my gosh, is that real?" And then the other friend is like, "Yes, that is real, oh my gosh." And so April, she runs to that doorway, she goes down the stairs, and she finds her friends at the foot of the stairs. And they're looking out into the main space of the basement that April can't quite see yet. And so she goes right down to her friends, she's looking at them, they look horrified, they're looking out at something obviously terrible in the basement, and April turns from her friends to the basement, and what she sees makes no sense. There's just like this empty basement, with some stuff pushed up against the walls, but in the middle of the basement is what appears to be like this standalone metal jail cell. Like imagine metal rungs that you would imagine in a jail, but all the way around. It's about 8 feet tall, 10 feet wide, 4 feet deep. It's just this inexplicable standalone jail cell. At least that's the way April interpreted it, and so did her friends. And as she's looking at it, April, she sees that in the middle of the jail cell, if you will, is like this big metal box that's just...
Oh my G. Please. That looks like some freaking Resident Evil stuff. Resident Evil or Wolfenstein stuff. Oh man.
Sitting on the floor in the center of the cell, and then right above it in the ceiling is this pretty big cutout, like a hole in the ceiling. And so April sees this and takes in what she's seeing, and she can't really process it. She doesn't really understand what this is. And she's looking at her friends, and they're so horrified. They've been yelling out about something being real, like, what is that? Oh my gosh. And she's kind of looking back and forth, and then she sees it. She sees there's something else inside of this jail cell. And when she sees it, she recoils in horror. She grabs her friends. They sprint out of the funeral home, and they call the authorities. When authorities arrived, they went right down into the basement and they looked inside of that jail cell, and quickly they determined that April and her friends had not been alone inside of this building like they had thought.
Oh my.
It would turn out 6 days earlier, a local man who had nothing to do with April and her friends, totally separate, had gone to this funeral home to have a look around. Except he wasn't an urban explorer. He was not going in here to have a good time or take photos. He was going inside to steal scrap metal and try to sell it for a profit.
There's always the scrap metal thieves. They're a big problem here in the Philippines. You know, they steal power lines.
And so he made his way inside the funeral home. He looked around, he didn't really find much, but eventually went down into the basement. And when he got down there, he turned, he looked out at that space down there, and he saw this jail cell, this metal jail cell that just kind of sat in the middle of the basement. Except what he would have seen is just the bars that sort of surrounded the outside of the cell, the actual cell itself. The metal box in the middle that was on the floor that April saw and her friend saw, that was not there. And the hole in the ceiling would not have been there. He would have just seen basically a lot of metal in the middle of the basement. So he's thinking, I've hit the jackpot. This is exactly what I've come here for, to take this metal and go sell it. And so this man, he goes into the jail cell, into this cage, and he quickly realizes the actual metal struts that made up the cage, even if they were super valuable.
Yeah, well, first of all, it's illegal. That's why so no sympathy for them.
They were thick and difficult to cut through, and so realistically, they were going to be really hard to extricate and get out of this place. But when the man is actually inside of this jail cell, this cage, he sees there's actually some other metal that he hadn't seen when he first came down that might be far easier to extract. Basically, right in the middle of this cell were additional metal rods that were running from the ceiling down to the ground. They were far thinner and easier to move around, and he's thinking, I could actually cut these and get these out of here and turn a profit on them, and then come back at a later date with, more people or more powerful tools to cut the metal that sort of was the cage, the stuff that he had originally seen. And so, feeling pretty optimistic, the guy put his stuff down, his phone, his wallet, his other things off to the side, in the cage. And then he got out his bolt cutters and he cut the very first one of these thinner cables right in the middle of the cell. And as soon as he cut one of them, there was this loud rumbling sound you would have heard right above him. And then this big metal box came crashing down and pinned him to the ground.
Well deserved.
It turned out, what this man had walked inside of was not a jail cell in the basement of the funeral home. It was actually the inner workings of something known as a casket lift. Basically, the funeral home has to raise caskets from the basement where potentially they're stored up to the main floor to be used. And, they're pretty cumbersome, big things that need to get moved around. And so effectively, they have an elevator that brings them up. And so that big metal box that came crashing down on this guy was the actual lift itself that actually carried up the caskets. And the cord that he cut were actually the cords that supported that lift. And so as soon as he cut one of them, he was cutting the support to effectively the elevator car that was right above him that then fell and crushed him. However, he didn't die from getting crushed. He just got trapped.
Meow, 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 meow. I wonder if he... whatever.
And as soon as he realized he was trapped and being kind of crushed to death here, he reached for his phone, but he realized his phone was just barely outside of his reach. He couldn't get to his phone. And nobody knew he was here.
We gotta remember sometimes he makes up some of the details to make it more entertaining. So whatever.
Here, this was an illegal activity. He didn't broadcast where he was going. And so he's stuck. He can't call anyone, and no one knows he's here. And so for 6 days, that lift gradually crushed this man to death. And then finally, when April and her friends showed up and they went down in the basement, they didn't just see, this destroyed casket lift. They saw this dead man's body, and he was literally outstretched, still reaching for his phone.
Man, like those like those bodies in Pompeii Right? They were frozen, as if they were still doing what they were doing when they were alive. Oh man.
On the morning of September 10th, 1987, Police Constable Dick Ellis walked into an interview room in a police station in South Yorkshire, England. Inside of this room was a table, and sitting on the other side of this table were these two security guards. One was named Stephen Brooks, and the other was named David Goldman. And from PC Ellis's perspective, his first impression of these two guys is they were like big, burly, tough-looking men. He could tell they were both visibly shaken, like something had really rattled both of these guys. However, before Ellis could even sit down and begin asking basic questions about what was...
Recently there have been, I think, a few cases when, metal thieves here in the Philippines got electrocuted to death. There are even some videos of it. Like, they would climb the power lines, the poles, and most of the time they would catch fire while being electrocuted. And the comments are always like making fun of them, saying they deserved it.
What's going on here? These two security guards just launched into this totally crazy sounding story. The men told Ellis that the night before they had been patrolling this construction site where workers were building a 6-mile stretch of highway and bridge that were called the Stocks Bridge Bypass. Now, at this time of night, there was nobody at the site.
Imagine all the people who cannot work from home, or people who lose their power while they're working. People who never qualify to work from home because they're always losing power. And all the disruption that they know. I actually mentioned that to one of my coworkers, like recently, back in February or March. We were talking about those people who steal power lines. I was rambling about how they affect so many people. Yeah, I was rambling about that. And some criminals think they're like freaking Robin Hood. But they're really screwing ordinary people over. Most of the time, even more than, the man. Cause disruptions and damage to our freaking utilities. Where do you think they'll get the funds to repair those? Of course, from the consumers. From the consumers, the same people who get their services interrupted. Yeah. Robin Hood, man.
Workers, nothing like that. And so really it was the security guard's job.
I don't even know why people romanticize Bonnie and Clyde. Their victims were ordinary people, especially the poor. Man,
I'm throwing a grenade.
and stop that Robin Hood shit, man.
To make sure nobody entered the site and either tampered with equipment or tried to steal anything. Now, the night had been very routine and quiet until around midnight. It was at that point that David and Stephen, these two security guards, had reached the bridge, the half-constructed bridge portion of this bypass. And as they're walking along the highway and they see the bridge out in front of them,
What are you gonna do to the half-constructed bridge, man?
they stopped because they saw clearly there was a figure standing on this bridge. It almost looked like a man who was wearing a long jacket, like a cloak or something, and he appeared to be staring down
Bro, it's a clan member. Just kidding.
below the bridge, down towards the valley, underneath what the bridge was actually going over. Like this man clearly had not spotted the security guards. And so naturally, they began calling out to this guy, asking him like, hey, what are you doing here? What's going on? This is a private construction site. Like, you need to go. But the guy on the bridge didn't react. He just kept staring down to the valley below. And so at that point, as the two security guards are now walking in the direction of this guy, one of them lifts up his flashlight and shines it at this man. And when he does, the beam of light appears to just go through this man's body. Like his body isn't solid, and the light just passed right through. And as soon as they did that, both Stephen and David just stopped, shocked at what they're seeing, aiming this light at this guy. And as they're doing this, the figure appeared to kind of turn and look at David and Stephen. And they were so unsettled and terrified by it that instead of protecting the construction site, they just turned and ran. And they went to the police.
Man, I do the same. Those two are freaking... They're geniuses, man.
Now, after P.C. Ellis had been told this story, he did not believe in any way that what they had experienced was supernatural. He's thinking, okay, clearly, you saw some guy, and, maybe he shouldn't have been there, and maybe it was a trick of the light or something, or maybe that wasn't a person at all, and you just thought it was. Like, who knows? But there has to be a logical, rational explanation here. And so feeling kind of annoyed that he was called in to deal with this, Ellis looks at these two guys, and he's like, look, this is not a police matter. Why don't you guys, if you're so shaken up by this, go talk to the church or something. Like, this is not something we can help you with. And at that, the two security guards...
You can escalate your concern to God.
just said, okay. And they got up and they left. And Ellis, truthfully, didn't think about this at all. It was like, okay, great, that's done. I don't got to deal with that. And he went on with his day. But later that day, Ellis got a call from his boss being like, hey, did you tell two security guards who came in here to go talk to the church about some ghosts they saw at a construction site or something? And at this, Ellis had to kind of explain what had happened and how he had sort of flippantly told them to, go see the church if they really thought they saw a ghost. But his boss was like, well, they took you literally, and they are currently at the local church, those two security guards, right now, and they are refusing to leave unless the church helps them with this ghost situation. And so Ellis is...
Yeah, man, they're just cooperating, man. I'm totally with the two security guards.
Fire in the hole. Clear the area out.
Not enough time. Oh, I don't have kit. Come on, man.
boss told him that you just need to go to the church, get these two guys to calm down, and leave. Go do that right now. And so Ellis is like, I can't believe they took that seriously. Okay, fine. So he hops in his cruiser, he goes to the church, he finds these two guys who are still totally shaken up, and they're pleading with people to take them seriously. Somebody needs to go out there and see what's on the bridge, see what this could have been. And Ellis is like, guys, I will, tonight, go to the bridge. I will check it out. I'll see what's going on there. If you leave the church and you don't...
Oh man, please don't go there by yourself. We need the gang of Scooby-Doo. Frick.
come back. Like, leave these people alone. And at this, David and Steven, they're totally relieved. They're like, oh, you will? Oh my gosh, great. We'll leave. Thank you. Like, let us know what you find. And they left the church. And so they left, and PC Ellis is like, okay, great. I guess tonight I'm going to go looking for ghosts. And so that night, around midnight, PC Ellis and his partner drove over to the construction site. Specifically, they went to the bridge. They got on the road that actually went underneath this unfinished bridge, and they camped out on this lower road. Looking straight up in front of them was this bridge. They're basically just going to monitor this bridge because that's where the security guards claim to have seen this figure, this ghost. They're going to stake out this bridge, see what happens, call it good. Now, at first, nothing happened on this bridge. Ellis and his partner just sat there, staring, bored up at this bridge, waiting for, the time to pass by so they could leave. But at some point, Ellis noticed movement up on the bridge, and so did his partner. Now, they couldn't quite tell what it was, and they couldn't even see if it was still moving around anymore, but clearly something had moved on the bridge. And so for a couple of seconds, Ellis and his partner are just staring really intently up at the bridge, waiting to see something else happen, but, nothing else did. And so Ellis is like, well, I gotta go up there and check because, maybe there is some guy who's trespassing on the construction site, and that's what the security guard saw. Like, I gotta go up there and see, because from down here, we really can't see too well. And so Ellis told his partner to just stay put in the car, and he, Ellis, would go up on the bridge and have a look around. So Ellis, he got out of the car, all he had was a flashlight, and he began walking over to the bottom of this bridge.
No.
Actually a ladder. He would have to climb up to the actual bridge.
Part of me wants to. But my favorite concept about ghosts is that they're still living in the past, They don't interact with us. We can see them pass through walls because they still follow the old they still follow the old floor plan. How the place was when they were still alive. So maybe we can see them floating because there was a second floor back then, or a flight of stairs. And then we can see them pass through walls because the wall wasn't there before. And when I was younger, I liked the idea of what do you call this? Imprint. If they feel something very strongly at a certain place, that manifests. Like you can feel it. Also, you can feel what they felt. Yeah, I do like the idea. But every time I feel like there's something supernatural or paranormal happening, then I get really scared.
Throwing grenades. Protect the area.
Diana.
Yeah, so the answer is I'd like to. I'd like to believe it to be, my idea that they cannot interact with us. That we can't hurt each other.
Bridge, because remember, they're on the road below this bridge. And so Ellis, he gets to the ladder, he begins climbing up the ladder, and as he's going up, he's kind of staring up, almost expecting somebody to poke their head over, but, it's quiet, no one's looking over the edge. And eventually, Ellis gets to the top, and he climbs onto the bridge, and again, it's this unfinished bridge, there's no traffic up here, and he looks roughly in the direction of where he thought he saw movement when he was down in the car looking up here, which also happened to be roughly the area where the two security guards had described seeing the figure that their light had shone through. And sure enough, Ellis looks and he sees there's this cloaked figure standing a little ways off of the side of the bridge, apparently just looking down towards his police car. And Ellis, at first, he's kind of shocked. He can't believe that, like, there's some legitimacy to the story these guys had told, and he couldn't help but be kind of frightened for a second. But then Ellis raised his flashlight and shined it at this figure, and as soon as he did, he just laughed. Because all it was a plastic tarp wrapped around some construction equipment. Like, that's what the security guards clearly had seen. And, when they shine their light, I mean, it's a clear plastic tarp here. The light could theoretically go through it. You can kind of see how they would think, oh my gosh, it's a ghost. And so Ellis is like, this is all this was. This was nothing. I knew it was nothing, and now I know it's nothing. And so after doing a cursory walk around the bridge to, make sure nobody was up there, and, he looked around, there wasn't anybody there. Ellis went back to the ladder, climbed back down, got in the car with his partner, and explained to him that this whole thing was a joke. And of course, there's no ghost, there's no criminals, there's nothing. This is no big deal. Now, Ellis and his partner could have, at this point, just left and gone home, but they had told their boss they'd come out here for at least an hour, and, they'd only been here for maybe 30 minutes at this point.
I also know about chupacabras. They're the vampire dogs, right? Supposedly, that leaves the triple hole, like the triangular 3-hole bites on chickens. I kinda don't, man, I don't. I've seen this before, the video of the hairless raccoon. I think it was, people were saying it's a chupacabra. Hairless raccoon. I kinda don't wanna play Zonzo right now. I also don't wanna play Dark Tide anymore. Even though there's a new class coming out. I just saw World of Tanks. I don't wanna play this on my phone. I do have it on my phone, but I don't wanna play. And of course, I also like the idea of, I know that they're not real though. Wendigos and skinwalkers.
Point. And so the two of them decided, you know what, just because we said we would, let's just stay here a little bit longer and make sure nobody goes on this bridge. We'll give it another, 30 minutes or so. And so Ellis and his partner just kind of sit back in their seats and settle in for this last little stretch of their shift. However, about 20 minutes into this final 30 minutes, Ellis is still just sitting there, his window's open, and he's just kind of doing nothing, waiting around, when suddenly he's hit with this unbelievably cold gust of air that comes into the car through his window. And it's kind of like sudden, like he's being hit with this gust of cold air. And then at the same time, Ellis began feeling this incredible pressure on his chest. Like it was so intense, he thought he was having a heart attack. And he wanted to say something to his partner, but it was like he couldn't even move. He's like frozen. He's getting scared. He doesn't know what's happening. And as much as he wanted to like yell out and get his partner's attention to help him, he suddenly had this overwhelming feeling that there was someone off to the side staring at him, someone right outside the car. And even though he didn't want to look, he found himself slowly turning and looking out his open window, and right there, immediately outside the door, is this man standing practically pressed up against the window. His torso is inches away from Ellis's face, just standing there inexplicably. Like this guy snuck up on them. They didn't even hear him. And so Ellis, at this point, he breaks out of his sort of trance. He screams and gets his partner's attention, and then he pushes open his door, and he jumps out to confront this person who snuck up on them. But there's no one outside the car. And so Ellis, he turns to his partner and he's like, hey, did you just see what I just saw? Did you see that guy? And Ellis's partner, who's totally ashen-faced, just looks at Ellis and he's like, yeah, I did see him. And so after looking around for a couple more seconds, Ellis climbed back into the car, and then he and his partner debriefed what had just happened. And Ellis's partner would tell Ellis that from his seat, he actually had a better vantage point than Ellis did to seeing this guy. I mean, Ellis was basically right on top of this guy, but his partner was a little bit farther back and had a better angle. And he would tell Ellis that at some point he had turned and seen the guy standing there, and the guy, he was wearing this old coat, this long coat that sort of looked like it belonged in the 1800s or something. And the partner would say, like, he didn't hear this guy approach, he didn't know how he got there, but at some point, he said the guy in the coat, the guy outside, crouched down just enough that he was looking in the car in the direction of Ellis's partner. And Ellis's partner said he was staring right at the guy, but the guy, he had no face. Ultimately, Ellis and his partner would return to the station that night, and they would file a report about what happened to them. But they would simply describe it as an inexplicable phenomenon, and after filing it, they basically hoped they would never have to talk about it again. Except that wouldn't be possible, because shortly after filing that report, the construction was finished, and so the highway and the bridge were open to the public. And pretty much right away, people started dying on that bridge. Like a crazy high number of people just inexplicably would get in these fatal accidents on the bridge. And this bridge was not like especially hazardous. It was a beautiful, brand new bridge. I mean, there really should not have been this many accidents. But it was not just that so many people were dying on this bridge inexplicably. No. Also, in tandem with all the fatal accidents were all the independently reported sightings of this dark figure standing on the bridge that had no face. So the leading theory amongst people who believe what's happening at this bridge is basically paranormal is that the construction of this bridge and the highway disturbed the gravesite, and that has led to all the tragedy and death that has followed. But they've never actually been able to prove if there really was a gravesite where this bridge or the highway was built. The two security guards, Stephen Brooks and David Goldthorpe, both quit their jobs. As for Ellis and his partner, they've never changed their stories, and they also have never found a reasonable explanation for what they saw. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know what you thought of today's episode in the comments. And remember, we have hundreds of...
Okay. You know, I remember, Sniper Wolf. Yeah, her fans are pretty out there. You know, even back when I was, just on reality, not yet YouTube. Yeah, and I've been into the streams of people who are big fans of Sniper Wolf.
One fan unleashed a computer virus to thousands of people and gave them one way out: to subscribe to his favorite YouTuber.
Oh my god, can you do that for me? Just kidding, don't do that, please.
Another female YouTuber got death threats for having a boyfriend. These aren't trolls, these are real fans who would do anything for their favorite YouTubers, even if it means going to prison. So to clarify, this video is not about every fan in these YouTube communities, nor is it always the fault of the YouTuber. It's about specific parts of these fandoms that take things too far. Hope you guys enjoyed the video, and make sure you guys subscribe, and I will do my very best for you. I'm Visual Venture, and you are awesome. The fans who couldn't be controlled. Not everyone has heard of the H3 podcast, but if you end up on their bad side, you'll discover what their fan base is capable of. Each week, the show covers the latest influencer fights and scandals, but they do more than report. They comment, judge, and sometimes flat out insult people. But the real problem is not what gets said on the show, it's what happens afterward.
The rest of the podcast is Ethan Klein pointing to people who he wants his audience to harass and doxing random
What the frick?
people.
The moment the show calls someone out, the H3 fan base moves like a mob. They hunt that person down online and attack. And because
Okay, before you guys, you guys don't have to freaking dox me. Yeah, I'm a YouTuber, but like I said, people know me from, people who play airsoft with me, and people who play games with me. They know who I am. So, like I always say, I don't have the same magic as, the usual VTubers who stay anonymous. So, if you're gonna dox me, you have nothing to gain from it. But please don't swat me. I don't wanna get swatted. My room is a mess. I don't want the cops to see how messy my room is.
there's always a new controversy, there's always a new target. The cycle never stops. But one day the fans did something so
I'm gonna have to explain to the cops. That I don't have real guns, only airsoft guns.
reckless, it shocked even the producers. In November 2022, a streamer named Amaranth became a major topic online. During a live stream, she revealed that her marriage was falling apart. She also accused her husband of treating her badly. The news circulated online and reached the H3 podcast. The hosts sat down to discuss it, and their audience was hooked.
That guy could be so unappreciative and ungrateful of
Man, you're just gonna take her word for it.
having her as his wife.
The audience was furious on Amaranth's behalf. More importantly, they wanted to know who Amaranth's toxic husband was. One of the H3 producers claimed she knew his identity.
He's a music producer and
Really?
songwriter, yeah.
But I hope that man's life is ruined for this.
I hope so.
I hope she divorces Axe and he gets nothing.
The producer then said a name on air, Nik Lee.
Give me his name.
Nik Lee.
Yeah, no,
Oh no, it's not me. Just kidding.
give it. I want this guy's life ruined. Are you kidding me?
They even thought about showing his social media handle on
They said Nick. No.
the screen. At the last moment, they paused.
Nik V. That is not a unique name whatsoever, so I just want to be very sure that we're not sending a mob of people after the wrong Nik Lee.
But the viewers weren't waiting for confirmation. They found a music producer named Nik Lee on social media. Then they shared his profile in the live chat. The producers tried to stop them.
The people that are sharing that account, I'm actually timing you out. That is literally a dox account that you're sharing in our chat right now, so please stop spamming that.
But the warning came too late. The mob already locked onto a target. And once that happens, there's almost nothing anyone can do to stop it. Within minutes of his name being mentioned, Nik Lee's life was in danger. His Instagram and Twitter blew up with messages. Hundreds of strangers accused him of horrible things. Some threatened to end his career. Others sent messages that were far, far worse. There was just one problem. The Nik Lee being attacked was not Amaranth's husband. He was a random music producer who shared the same name. The H3 podcast producers soon realized what was happening.
As I predicted, our fans are harassing the wrong person.
But
But, and that's why I was saying, I know you were saying don't do it, but the idiots in our audience are always going to end up doing it.
Eventually, the producer who named him apologized.
It was definitely me. A Reddit thread led me to the wrong place. And
Oh no, you done messed up, lady. Shit. Smells like a lawsuit. Just kidding.
and I should not have said his profession when I didn't know for sure.
Once fans realized the error, the attacks stopped. Some even posted apologies to the innocent Nik Lee. The H3 podcast played a role in triggering that situation, and it was not an isolated...
Man, I'm a dumbass too. But I make sure that people don't know dumb things because of me.
case. The same thing happened with other people on other episodes.
He stated my real name no less than 17 times, and also showed it on the screen a few dozen more times.
Each time, the pattern repeats. A name is mentioned, the fans react like a mob, and the person's life on the other end is now in danger. Our next chapter is about a group of fans who found out where their favorite YouTuber lived and used it against them. The fans who couldn't accept reality. Being a VTuber sounds like a dream job
Oh no! Shit.
until fans turn on you. VTubers or virtual YouTubers are real people who stream as cartoon avatars. Their real identities are kept secret.
I'm so excited!
Oh, well, mine is not.
I'm so excited! Okay, I'm so excited. I feel so alive right now.
Most fans see it for what it is, just entertainment. But for others, the line between fantasy and reality disappears. They don't see a cartoon character on a screen. They start to believe the VTuber is a real person in their life. Some fans even convince themselves that the VTuber is their virtual girlfriend. That level of attachment can be dangerous. When something
I mean, I keep on saying that the Wanderer from Genshin Impact is my husband. Whatever.
shatters that fantasy, those fans don't just get sad, they become furious. In the worst cases, they go after the real person behind the avatar. That's exactly what happened to Mano Aloe. Mano Aloe began streaming as a VTuber in August 2020. During her first stream, she gained 100,000 subscribers. Her career was off to an incredible start. But within days, it all came crashing down. Mano Aloe's fans discovered her real identity, and it was all because of a mistake she made months before her debut. Months earlier, Aloe tested her digital avatar on a personal account. She was supposed to delete the stream afterward, but she never did. Fans eventually found that old account.
Dummy. Just kidding.
It was linked to all of her personal social media profiles. Just like that, the person behind the Mano Aloe avatar was exposed. In the VTuber world, the fantasy is everything. Breaking it is a big deal. Since they knew who she was, fans reviewed her social media history.
Oh no, it's a real girl, not a guy. Not interested. Just kidding.
They didn't like what they saw. Some posts were considered inappropriate. There were also posts suggesting she had a boyfriend. To some of her fans, that felt like a deeper betrayal, and they went after her. They found phone numbers from Mano Aloe and her suspected boyfriend. Then they called non-stop day and night. Aloe's agency finally got involved, but instead of defending her, they asked her to apologize. She did.
大変ご迷惑をおかけしてしまい、本当に申し訳ございません。この件に関しては、カバー株式会社の厳重注意があり、
In the same video, she asked fans to stop the harassment, doxing, and bullying.
特定があまりにも進んでしまって、現在家の固定電話に電話がかかってきたり。
She also revealed her agency was suspending her for 2 weeks. She probably hoped things would settle down. It didn't.
Man, that sounds like a penalty for a real job. What is a real job for them, no?
Barely a week later, another video surfaced from Aloe's old account. It showed her criticizing the VTuber industry.
そうだからダメだよ。
Oh
あんまりブラックすぎるというか束縛が激しい事務所に行ったらやばいよ、恋愛禁止だしね。
She also made offensive comments about other VTubers. The fans were furious. They felt she was being disloyal and ungrateful. Many demanded she be fired immediately. By that point, Mano Aloe had enough. 2 weeks of online attacks were too much for her. On August 31st, 2020, she quit VTubing for good. In a statement, she said she was not physically or mentally prepared to continue with her activities. Mano Aloe came into VTubing with a dream. Instead, she was pushed out by fans who had zero tolerance for mistakes. Our next chapter is about a group of fans whose loyalty to a creator eventually led to a real-world tragedy. The fans who hacked the world.
What? Yeah, this one.
This is a story about fans who broke the law to get subscribers for a YouTube channel. But this was no ordinary crime. They used cyber terrorism tactics. For years, PewDiePie had the most subscribers on YouTube. But in late 2018, a channel called T-Series started closing the gap.
Who is this T-Series channel? This channel will pay us PewDiePie. I'm number one! I'm number one!
So we've covered the situation multiple times in the past, but this one is different. The rivalry is not the main focus here. What matters is how PewDiePie's fans reacted. His fans launched a campaign to keep PewDiePie at number one. Most fans made videos and posts asking others to subscribe, but some extreme fans felt that wasn't enough. Instead of asking, they wanted to force people to subscribe. In 2018, a hacker calling himself Hacker Giraffe logged...
That's like freaking ransomware. That's similar to ransomware.
onto a site called Shodan. Shodan is basically a
DDoS, denial of service
search engine, but instead of finding websites, it finds vulnerable devices connected to the internet. That includes printers, cameras, and smart TVs with no password protection. Hacker Giraffe found about 800,000 unsecured printers worldwide. He selected 50,000 of them as targets. Then he hacked into all of them at once.
See what they do? They're screwing over ordinary people like me and you.
After gaining access, he made every printer produce a poster. People around the world were stunned as their printers suddenly came to life.
What?
Part of the message read, PewDiePie is in trouble and he needs your help to defeat T-Series. Subscribe to PewDiePie. The internet reacted immediately. Thousands posted about it on social media. One tweet read, so this just randomly printed on one of our work printers. I think...
Man... Shit...
PewDiePie has hacked our systems. Others made videos reacting to it.
They hacked a series of printers to print out sheets telling people to subscribe to PewDiePie. Again, amazing.
Even PewDiePie found it amusing, but he was careful with his response.
That's what I need. That's what I'm talking about. All this support to keep me on top is so funny. Just don't do anything illegal.
But Hacker Giraffe wasn't finished. He and his allies hacked into 65,000 smart TVs around the world. Suddenly, the same message appeared on TV screens inside people's homes.
PewDiePie, the #1 most subscribed channel on YouTube, is about to be overthrown by Indian music company T-Series. Please go to YouTube and subscribe to him ASAP.
They also targeted the Wall Street Journal. To many PewDiePie fans, the Wall Street Journal was the enemy because they published stories criticizing PewDiePie in the past. They hacked the Wall Street Journal website and left this message. The Wall Street Journal would like to apologize to PewDiePie. Due to misrepresentation by our journalists, those of whom have now been fired, we are sponsoring PewDiePie to reach maximum subscribers and beat T-Series to 80 million. The crime spree made headlines. The hackers were blamed for causing chaos, but Hacker Giraffe argued he was doing people a favor. He claimed he was exposing how weak their security really was, and the bad hackers could have stolen files, installed malware, and caused physical damage. He claimed it was a warning. Other hackers soon followed his footsteps. A few months later, a computer virus called PewCrypt appeared online. It was created by another PewDiePie fan. When PewCrypt infected a computer, it locked every file on the device. Photos, documents, and videos became completely inaccessible. Usually, ransomware hackers demand money. This one demanded something else. The ransom message...
See, I told you it's like ransomware.
message said that if PewDiePie reached 100 million subscribers before T-Series, the files would be unlocked. If not, the files would be deleted forever. To save their files, everyone needed to subscribe to PewDiePie. Security experts confirmed the virus was real. At the time, there were no tools capable of cracking it. Infected users could only wait and hope. Eventually, programmers created a decryption tool for the virus, and the files were unlocked. Everyone heaved a sigh of relief. However, the situation was about to get much worse. In March 2019, a violent incident occurred at a public place in New Zealand. Before it happened, the culprit looked into a camera and said, "Subscribe to PewDiePie." Multiple lives were lost. Now, I want to clarify that he was most likely not a real fan, just a terrible individual. When PewDiePie heard it, he was horrified. He tweeted that he was absolutely sickened by having his name linked to the incident. Days later, he asked his fans to end the campaign.
This was all made to be fun, but it's clearly not fun anymore. It's clearly gone too far.
What started as fans rallying behind a creator turned into hacking, ransomware, and a real-world tragedy. The person in our next chapter received death threats against their family and their animals, and the police couldn't stop it. The fans who defended everything. Colleen Ballinger, also known as Miranda Sings, didn't just have subscribers. She had a...
I don't really like long-haired women a lot, but I gotta say Sniper Wolf is pretty attractive to me. I mean, face-wise.
Cult-like following with millions of fans. Her channel had 10.7 million subscribers. Most of them were teenagers who idolized her.
Today I'm going to be trying lots of different Asian snacks. Someone sent me all these. I don't know where they're from.
Her fan base even had a name, the Merfandas. But in 2020, her family-friendly image was challenged. A teenage fan accused her of inappropriate behavior. His name was Adam McIntyre, and he posted a YouTube video explaining his experience. Adam showed the text messages and personal items Colleen sent him.
This was what I was sent. I don't even know, sorry, I don't know which way this goes. This is what I was sent, okay.
Many viewers believed him based on the evidence, but Colleen's fans did not. To them, Adam was not a victim. He was just someone trying to take down their favorite creator. So they decided to silence him. Adam was a well-known member of Colleen's fan base. He was active in group chats and fan spaces. He had real friends within the community. The moment he spoke out, he was dropped from those groups. Friends he trusted cut him off overnight. Then the attack started. Colleen's fans dug through everything Adam ever posted online. They wanted anything to discredit him. Some created long threads trying to debunk his claims. The pressure kept building. It got so bad that Adam disabled comments on his YouTube video. So Colleen's fans moved to Twitter. Every day, Adam received insults and threats. Adam fought back the only way he could. He posted follow-up videos, shared more screenshots, and explained his side.
People were saying that after she posted her video addressing everything, that I was a liar because she came out and addressed everything, but she just didn't deny anything.
But speaking out made things worse. The more he explained, the more he was attacked. This was no longer about defending Colleen. It became about destroying Adam's life. By the end of 2020, it seemed like the fandom silenced him. But the situation was not over. It turned out Adam wasn't alone. More fans came forward accusing Colleen of behaving inappropriately with them. Because of Colleen's popularity, the story spread fast. Rolling Stone covered it. Other YouTubers made videos about it. It even made it to the news.
Colleen Ballinger, who's better known as her online persona Miranda Sings, is facing significant backlash. She's been accused of having inappropriate relationships with some of her underage fans.
Colleen's reputation began to collapse, but her most loyal fans refused to change their view. Even as new accusers came forward, some still blamed Adam for everything, and they were set on destroying him for good. They posted tweets calling Adam an attention seeker. They accused him of working for years to finally get this moment to ruin Colleen for no good reason. Then things escalated. People started creating fake evidence against Adam. One post was made to look like Adam admitting he lied. Adam later found that fake post online.
I want to fess up and admit that I am guilty of everything that has happened. I want to make tis right.
Some wanted to hurt Adam in real life. They threatened to send SWAT teams to Adam's house.
We currently have a team getting ready to SWAT your house. Your address is located and threats will be sent. Go against Colleen and this is what will happen to you.
This harassment continued for 3 years. Eventually, Adam reached his limit. To protect himself, Adam filed a report with the police. Then he made a video warning the fans to back off.
All of this has stemmed because of the amount of doxing, swatting, death threats, threats to my family, threats to my animals.
The police report didn't stop the attacks, but while Adam was dealing with that, Colleen was dealing with her own hate. In June 2023, she made an apology video to try and save her career. But instead of a straightforward statement, she pulled out a ukulele and sang.
I've been wanting to come online and talk to you about a few things. Even though my team has strongly advised me to not say what I want to say, I recently realized that they never said that I couldn't sing.
The video was widely criticized. It came off as sarcastic and defensive. Some called it one of the worst apologies on YouTube. For the first time, her fan base could not control the narrative. Colleen's career collapsed, but many of the fans who targeted Adam still support her today. The person in her next chapter was so afraid of a YouTuber's fans, they considered abandoning their home. The fandom that took revenge too far. SS Sniper Wolf has a fan base that treats her like
I don't really like long-haired women, but you know, I do find her pretty attractive.
like she can do no wrong. She has over 35 million subscribers on YouTube. With that many fans, it's no surprise that some of them are aggressive. And that aggression has caused a lot of problems on the internet. One of SS Sniper Wolf's biggest rivals was a fellow creator, Aziland. The conflict started because their thumbnails looked similar. Both accused the other of copying their style. Most people might have let something like that go. These two didn't. In 2023, Aziland gave an interview and made the feud worse. She claimed SS Sniper Wolf stole her life. That statement triggered the fan base. They left hateful comments on Aziland's videos. They made TikToks comparing the two creators, trying to prove Aziland was the copycat. The attacks kept coming day after day. Eventually, it escalated to threats.
It's like, you don't deserve to live because you've stolen from this person and ruined their life.
Aziland described the situation, saying it's become like hell. I can't avoid it even if I try. Eventually, she stopped posting altogether. Her last video was in September 2023. But Aziland wasn't the only person SS Sniper Wolf's fans attacked. Another target had it much worse. A YouTuber named Jax Films had a different kind of problem with SS Sniper Wolf. He thought her reaction video...
I mean, we're seeing the same stuff from what's her name? Smogalona and that guy.
Were lazy, low-effort content, so he made parody videos mocking her content. SS Sniper Wolf didn't like it, so she decided to respond. In October 2023, she posted an Instagram story. She was standing outside Jax Films' house filming it. She added the caption, "Let's talk."
And that's just wrong. And I don't want to support those kinds of people. Intimidation and freaking... What's she gonna do? Encourage attacks, intimidate the person, and that's why I don't like those people. You know, if I remember, maybe we'll look into it. We'll watch another video on a future stream if I remember. You know, I don't even like those kinds of people in real life. If all you're gonna do is throw poop at another person, man, I don't want to be with that kind of person. You can complain, but if you're gonna do like a slander or libel, I don't want to be around you.
Talk like adults. Jax Films found out during a live stream.
She's literally right outside.
Oh my god!
This is happening right. So call the police.
She deleted the post soon after, but screenshots were already spreading online, and it contained Jax Films'
Crazy girl. Just kidding.
home address, and now everyone knew where Jax Films lives. The next day, he uploaded a video. SS Sniper Wolf came to our home last night. It's time for YouTube to step in. He was upset.
No one should feel unsafe in their own home, and thanks to Sniper Wolf, my wife and I now do.
He and his wife considered moving just to feel safe again, but as they were about to find out, the worst was yet to come. Across social media, people were upset about Jax Films getting doxxed.
She has created a situation where someone from her very devoted audience could do something very stupid and very terrible.
Users called on YouTube to punish SS Sniper Wolf. Then something unusual happened. A wave of Twitter accounts appeared out of nowhere, and they had one job: aggressively defend SS Sniper Wolf. Anyone who criticized her got attacked, but this went way beyond arguments. These accounts began doxing people.
Oh no. It's her personal SS. You can say SS Sniper Wolf without SS.
Basically, if someone would criticize...
Hello, I don't understand what you wrote, man. You know, welcome. Hello.
Criticize SS Sniper Wolf, soon after, their private information would appear online. The situation was becoming chaotic. Then YouTube stepped in. They temporarily demonetized SS Sniper Wolf's channel because YouTube's terms of service prohibit threats or doxing. It was a small victory for Jax Film. SS Sniper Wolf later apologized for filming outside Jack's house, but the apology didn't undo any of it. Aziland was already chased off the internet. Jack and his family were in danger in their own home, and random people were doxed just for speaking up. The fans believed they were protecting their creator. In reality, they were making life unbearable for other internet users. These fandoms didn't start out dangerous. They started out as people who just really loved something, but somewhere along the way, love turned into obsession, and obsession turned into destruction. My friends, being a fan is fine. Becoming a weapon is not. Visual Venture. Wait, before you go, make sure you guys watch part 1 of this Toxic Fandom series where we talk about a music critic who got death threats over a Taylor Swift review, an esports team that received a weapon in the mail, and a Star Wars fan who tracked down a child actor's home address. Click right here to watch it. Love you guys. Peace.
So it's great to come across content like that, you know, reminding me not to become like that. Anyway, I can't wait to eat the sinigang. Hell yeah. Alright, it's already been 3 hours. And you guys take care, okay? Man, I like Star Wars. Let's see, my favorite character. Probably the clones. You know, as a whole entity. I can't think about any other character, okay? And, I'll see what time I'll be streaming tomorrow, maybe the same time. And I do hope that, you know, my final course exam becomes available. And I hope that my job pushes through. Yeah, but I don't want to overthink right now. There's still, I don't know. I don't know what time the company will open, what time I'll get the messages, what time they're gonna update. So yeah, thank you and bye bye. Take care. Being good.